Only several people know about what happened with Blueberry. I've never told all the confusing bits and pieces strung properly together. It took me 2 weeks to finish writing this. I would start typing, and some memories and details that I had filed away extra well would emerge and come flooding back. I showed this to my husband before putting it up here, so that he could know about this before the internet does. I think he's still stunned. He knew Blueberry as well, but I think now he understands some of my quirks and nervous tics. Sophomore year in high school is when it started. That would be 2003, I believe. His real name was Michael D, but he was called Blueberry by our circle of friends. I have long forgotten the story of the moniker, but I imagine it was selected mostly to distinguish from the many other Michaels around. He was a tall, gawky, acne-afflicted junior who had a hands-in-a-pocket angry walk, as well as a deep dimple in the middle of his chin, and an absolutely intelligible manner of speaking. Intelligible to the point where his secondary nickname was Michael Mumble. I don't remember anything in particular about that meeting, really. Just a few passing words, a mutual friend stepping in to wave an introductory hand back and forth, while repeating our names to an other in quick bursts like a squeeze on a rifle. I was a spunky 15-year-old discovering a whole new diverse world out there. And in retrospect, I see how my giddy naivete left the door wide open for Blueberry to step through. He would talk or mumble to me before first period. I struggled to understand what was said behind his tight lips that hardly moved, so our interactions were usually brief and consisted mostly of me smiling brightly and nodding along before politely excusing myself. I often picked up on his awkward anger and aggression, stuffed so deep and snug inside his 6'3" frame. All teenagers are angry. Hell, even spunky me had my moody sprees. But Blueberry's anger was different. It was warped, twisted, stubborn, narcissistic, permeating, calm, autistic kind of anger. I remember thinking to myself that it just burned the air around him. Being 15 at the time, I had no car, so I took my lunches at a Subway that sat 2 blocks away from my school. Sometimes I went with friends, but more often I went by myself. I liked the quiet and chance to regroup from school's chaos. He appeared one day, mumbling away across from me in a booth while I pasted on a slightly puzzled smile, lips tight over my mouth full of food, wondering on what on earth he was saying. Then the letters came. My best friend Christy and I wrote tons of notes during our class periods to fold up into neat squares and swap with each other in the halls. This was how we plotted and schemed before the advent of text messaging. We had designated hallways where we would hand off our paper squares, and one of these hallways was where I would see Blueberry as well. One day, I had just slyly palmed Christy's note in my hand when I suddenly felt a tap on my shoulder, and a paper slid into my other hand. It was Blueberry, staring at me with a slight smile. With a surprised chuckle and a nod of acknowledgement, I tucked his note into my purse along with Christie's. I soon found out that not only was he Michael Mumble, he was Michael Muddled. While his handwriting was neat and printed, and I was far from an illiterate, I could not make head or tails out of his train of thought. He wrote as he spoke, in a mashed, inverted manner, wherein the subject matter was vague, at best. All I could make out of the letters he would give me, from that day on, was that I was part of the subject matter. Something about my considerations, or me not seeing, filling up the paper margins were badly drawn frogs, babbling about druids and more frogs. I got these letters often, usually daily. I probably wrote a short one back to him once, maybe twice at most, but they came steadily as ever. As spring wound down, I began to get more uneasy around him. To the group, Blueberry was Blueberry, just a normal little oddball in the background. Began to avoid him, but he seemed blind to that. And in retrospect, at the age of 25, I can safely say that people pick up when you are avoiding them. But not Blueberry. The lunchtime interceptions and notes continued when he could manage it. And then came the gifts. I was a writer back then. I always had notebooks that I constantly filled up with any scribblings that came into my head. I wrote in the cheap, smaller size spirals that you can pick up at any drugstore. I knew better than to buy nice, fancy ones. They'd last me a week at best. but it was a fancy heavy-bound journal that Blueberry gave me one day in the hallway after school. I didn't know what to say. It was an odd gift from someone whom I barely knew. There was something tainted about the journal. It was beautiful, a plush notebook etched with the design of an ancient map of China, and I swear the covers were of suede. It was expensive, enchanting, and it gave me the chills. The first 10 pages consisted of yet another letter that he'd penned to me. The first several paragraphs talked about how I was the only one who understood him, and he loved me. I stopped at that point. I could never bring myself to write in or throw it away. Instead, I tucked it in a keepsake box that slept underneath my bed, along with the other notes and trinkets. I told myself that I was giving out the wrong signals. I told myself I was being silly and overreacting to someone who was perfectly nice. Christy told me, "You're lucky that someone buys you something so nice, without even trying to sleep with you." Other friends told me, Blueberry's just a goof, but he's alright. I was grateful when summer rolled around. Junior year, when school started back up, I had a boyfriend named Adam. Brightly dyed hair with a red car, so Blueberry inevitably faded into the background, whether he liked it or not. He had no driver's license, nor a wish to get one, strange for being 18, as he was then, preferring the alternative of a bicycle and then walked everywhere. Looking back, I realized that this made it harder for him to intercept me at lunch, when I zipped off to meet my older boyfriend at home for the hour-long break. The only times I would see Blueberry was when I was pulling out of the parking lot, and I would see him during his brisk, frustrated fuel strides in whatever direction. His eyes were always either angrily fixed at a point in the distance, and his chin was set in a tight line of frustration, or seemed to be searching the sea of high school students flooding the parking lot for me. Every now and then, he would spy my cherry red Volvo station wagon, which was embarrassingly hard to miss, and would just stare. For the most part, humans can get a decent read on others. This wasn't the case with Blueberry. I couldn't make heads or tails of him and his behavior around me. And eventually, my teenage hormones said fuck it. And by fuck it, I mean, I made no more efforts. I decided the best way to fix the situation was to not give a shit. If he talked to me, I would respond with short sentences, then bluntly turn and walk away. I didn't avoid him, but neither did I approach or wave at him in the hallways like I had the year before. It was just another guy in the background. Let me also add, in the meantime, the letters never stopped. And the gifts came almost like clockwork. A journal left on my car with the first 4 pages scribbled with words that I never bothered to read. A bouquet of daisies or roses given to me in the hallway that I promptly gave to a lonely-looking freshman as I turned the next corner. A book of fairy tales on my birthday, also with an inscription inside. The journals, books, and letters were hardly ever actually read, nor used, and all found a new home in that keepsake box underneath my bed. I could never explain why I felt compelled to tuck them into a keepsake box, but I just did. At times I would feel guilty, and I would look for anything that I was doing to lead this insane boy on what on earth compelled him to buy things for a girl that just didn't care. But in the end, my teenage psyche always lost interest and went back to scheming over how I was going to get around curfew and catch that wicked show happening at the local music venue on a school night. My junior year of high school wound down much like this. When school let out for the summer, I was just happy to be able to be with my friends and not worry about Blueberry. He was a senior, and that had been his last year in the school with us. I came home one afternoon and sauntered into the kitchen to grab a snack. My father had just come home from work, barely beating me by 5 minutes, as I could tell how he'd already taken off his suit jacket and brought in the mail. He was leaning against the kitchen counter and plucking the bills from my mother's overflow of catalogs when I walked up to peck him on the cheek and offered him one of the 2 apples I'd retrieved. "Hey there, hun," he mumbled, taking the apple. "Oh, hold up, kid. You have mail, lucky you." He flipped a rectangular manila envelope towards me, and I took it. Who's sending me snail mail? I thought to myself, popping open the sealed flap. Maybe it's Grandma. Ooh, does it feel like a check in here? I start to hum a Smiths song as I pry open the brads that anchor the flap. I pull the letter out. It's a single page of lined notebook paper. I shake the page, and my eyes focus on the first line. I really don't want to shit. I know that handwriting. Blueberry. I remember yelping in surprise and dropping the letter as if it had burned me. I remember grabbing the envelope and flipping it over to where the addresses should be. I don't know why. I already knew it wouldn't make me feel better to see the street numbers I called home, along with my name carefully printed in the center. It did make me feel better, however, to see that a city in Colorado was listed at the top left's return address. Blueberry had left Texas, or so I hoped, because it sure made me sick to see that there was no postage stamp. He had to have hand-delivered it to my home, which he somehow tracked down. The letter frightened me, both its content as well as the fact that Blueberry had found out where I lived. I grilled all of our mutual friends and swore that they hadn't been the ones to give out the information. In the letter itself, he had sounded almost angry with me, or upset that I hadn't made good on some sort of agreement. Who knows? Thankfully, that was the last I heard of Blueberry. For several years, anyway. In high school, I was creeped out by a strange boy called Blueberry. Those events took place in 2005. Fast forward to spring of 2008. I was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, but preparing to move back to my hometown to kick a nasty drug habit and get a fresh start. I had taken a break from packing up my apartment and headed to the library to clear my head and to check my MySpace. There was a friend request waiting for me when I logged in. Yup, the cliche reappearance of the protagonist. It was Blueberry. Still to this day, I have no idea what possessed to accept the request, but I did. I accepted it. Almost immediately, I got a message from him. It was quite civilized, actually. He asked how I was doing and even offered an apology for his behavior in high school. I was pleasantly surprised and appreciated the gesture and sent him a response saying so, along with a brief synopsis of my plans on moving back home, only after ensuring that he was still in Colorado, as his profile said. By the time I clicked send, my allotted time on the computer was up, so I logged out and headed back to my place to prepare for the move back home the next day. 3 days and one state later, I was back at home and finally feeling human again as the bumps and bruises of the move subsided. It had been a busy few days, and I gladly popped down in front of my father's laptop to check my email and my social media. I logged into MySpace and began to work through the stack of accumulated messages. I opened up the reply from Blueberry. It had been sent almost instantly after I'd sent my reply several days ago. Well, that's a coincidence, huh? Blueberry was moving back to our hometown as well. Godspeed to him and all his endeavors was all I thought of it. I didn't think I'd be running into him often, as our old group of friends had long disbanded to get married, move away, or get locked up. I had just picked up a job waiting tables at the 24-hour diner chain Denny's and enrolled in a summer college course. Life went on, but not for that long. I just started a swing shift at work, and I was at the counter filling up salt and pepper shakers and setting up the floor before the dinner rush hit when he walked in. I knew who he was while he was still in my peripheral. He slid into the swivel chair and mumbled what I can only imagine was a hello, then put his right hand on mine, which was wrapped up in a salt tumbler I had been refilling. Terror and confusion painted my insides. Another spike in blood pressure as he squeezed down hard, if only for a second, before releasing his grip. He stared and he mumbled. This is the part of the story that I find myself taking the longest time to write, because I keep exiting out of my word program and distracting myself with the unimportant busy work to avoid writing about what comes next. You see, this is the part where I left the door wide open for him to step in and catch me off guard. I could have prevented all of this had I just done something different. It's something I'm still angry with myself over, and it's never easy to talk about. So I'm probably going to skip out on a lot of the details and deliver the bare bones. I've dragged my heels through the story to this point, to use all the details you know about me and Blueberry that I've given so far to put together the big picture. This is going to be the first time I've ever told this story in its entirety, much less the final chapter, which I may or may not be able to finish. I should have told him to fuck off that day. I should have listened to my gut, which was screaming profanities at my rationalizing everything away brain. I knew that he moved from Colorado back down to our hometown because I was there. I knew that he'd taken that reply on my MySpace as a sign of my declaring undying love to him inside his twisted mind. I knew deep down that he was still that same scary fucker, that one that found out where I lived in high school, but a part of me had truly thought that we matured past that point but all that was wishful thinking. Instead, I smiled politely, nodded, and excused myself to do anything but to be around him. I ended up in the bathroom dry heaving. Anxiety, it's a bitch. I was stuck. I was the only waitress on the floor until 7, which was a good 3 hours away. I had a credit card payment due in 3 days. I could not leave the floor. I remember talking to myself like a crazy person. He'd only said one word. I was being ridiculous. Nobody is twisted enough to do that over a girl that's barely spoken to him or returned any affections. Ludicrous. And who knows what he actually said back there or what he meant by touching my hand. He could just be surprised to see me. So who's the crazy person here? It's me. Then why had he looked at me as if he was gloating, as if he was hungry? Dry heave to the porcelain gods again, and dart off to the floor. Stay busy, stay away from the counter, stay away from Blueberry. Unbeknownst to me, while I went about avoiding him, Blueberry had applied for a position as a dishwasher, which is always open in diners, and was hired on the spot. I found out the next day as I clocked in and saw him carefully studying the employee schedule. Should have said something then, but I didn't. I was afraid. I didn't have time to think either. I managed to somehow change clothes, tie my apron, dry heave yet again, before my shaking legs found their way onto the floor. Like I said before, so much of it is a blur. I'm typing as fast as I can to get to the end of this nightmare fucking story. I don't remember many specific incidents leading up towards the end. I remember Friday night bar rush when he yelled at a 65-year-old man, a regular of mine that had come to think of a grandpa, because he thought he was looking at me with pervert eyes. I remember how many times he tried to stop me while I was neck deep in the weeds with drunk and hangry customers, catching my arm, rougher each and every time to make me stop and look at him. The last time he grabbed me so hard a bruise bloomed in place of his fingers the next morning. I remember the look of pure hatred and frustration that he gave every one of my male customers. And I remember how he said he would slit them ear to ear if they ever touched me. I remember when my shift ended, and I held all of it in until I made it into the walk-in freezer. I just let out half a sob when the freezer door swung open, and Blueberry had himself in front of me. I remember the metallic taste of fear as I looked up at him. What next? He was looking forward to the talk we would have after work, he said. The talk about us? Oh God, no. I remember wanting to scrub my forehead with lye from where he bent down and kissed me before exiting the walk-in. He made me sick being so close to me. Dirty. I remember the desperate need to leave. I clock out, knowing that he won't be off for hours after me. I can escape. I pull out of the parking lot and stop at a red light 2 blocks down and find a friend to stay with. Figure this all out. God, I need my job. The passenger door opens. It's him. When the hell did my passenger door not lock? Did he? He broke my lock. And fuck, he's now in my car. I'm numb. He acts like this is a normal thing for us to do. My logic freezes. He gives me the directions to his house, telling me how happy he is that I've finally come around after all these years of denying what was between us. I can't breathe. A part of me is giving up. A part of me is so mad at myself for being so weak and unable to stop all of this. Wait, I'm not completely numb. There's still some anger in me. I'm starting to get angry at this person who's repeatedly refused to take no for an answer, who intentionally came back to our town with the narcissistic, presumptuous intent of claiming me now that I'd supposedly come around. He came into my job and made sure to move in fast, hard, and aggressively, because he knew this is what I would do. The only words that I'd ever heard him speak clearly and without mumbles was the threat to slit my customer's throat from ear to ear. He walked out of his first night on the job just to follow me and then got into my car as I was at a stoplight. Fuck that. As I had the opportunity to sit and process the absurdity and the increasingly disturbing levels of the situation, I became temporarily lost in a fugue state of memory, realization, and gritty resolve. We reached this place and I snapped back to reality immediately. I saw that the front lawn was teeming with drunken partygoers. His roommate had thrown a keg party and drew enough people to fill a high school stadium. To this day, I consider this the only reason I felt brave enough to do what I did next. There were too many people around to hear and see things. I knew it and he knew it, and he didn't seem happy with it. I followed him into his house. I let him take me to his room. I stood in the open doorway and balked as he tugged on my wrist to pull me into the room for God knows what reason. It was like another person was speaking through me. Then I realized how quiet it was. I swear to God, everyone in that party stopped and stared at us. It was so quiet, and all the blood in my body was pumping in the war dance of fear disguised as rage. I saw him falter. We locked eyes. I could tell that he was grasping, and then I tried to pull away. He was strong, and then he screamed. God, I'll never forget how angry he looked. He wasn't mumbling. He screamed so clearly.
Just fucking lay with me tonight. Why won't you just lay on the bed, you
He lurched forward like a tension-bearing spring to drag me into his room. It was at that point that the bodies flew at him. Several of them. They tackled Blueberry to the floor. Beer was flying everywhere. The froth was landing in my hair. My shirt was wet with the faint scent of fresh hops. They were screaming. Hands on hands. Girl hands. Nails digging into Blueberry's iron fingers. I could feel my blood slowing at the pockets where he had me firmly held. Arms must be blue, I thought to myself before I saw the girls. 3 of them, blonde and red.
Run, come on, get away from him,
they yell. His fingers are slipping claws, but the long solar nails of all 3 women are too much. He flinches with a jerk that forces him to let go. He disappeared under the heap of bodies. My legs finally worked again. I ran to my car. I ran the fuck away. I still don't know who the men who tackled him were. Neither do I know the names of the women who scratched their own nails into Blueberry's skin so that he would let go. And they could flank me in protection as I ran to the car. Still to this day, I don't think I've ever been faced with a truer definition of solidarity than the act right there. They didn't even know who I was when they all dove in. I don't know what kind of spiritual force is out there, roaming the purple evenings with those who are alone. But more nights than not, I say a little thank you to the skies, hoping at least one of them hear me. I owe those strangers a great deal. Now that I've said that, the thing of this part of the story is, it's not over. It hasn't gotten bad yet, not by a long stretch. The final part was the hardest to write. Still get sick to my stomach thinking about it at times. Here goes. At this point, I wish I could say that it's over. It's not. Stalkers are persistent. They don't think like you and I do. What I had done the night that I told Blueberry no was something good and bad. Good in that I had acted loudly enough to become a person to him, not an object. Bad in the sense that I had set down boundaries that conflicted with his intents. And I had done it in front of a crowd of people, embarrassing him. I knew that where he had just seen me as a living doll before, he would now see me as someone to be punished. This is what I thought to myself as I stared at the ceiling, stained with the sharp gold light of a noon sun. I had barely slept after crashing through my front door and quickly, desperately checking each window and locked my father's front door before collapsing in a heap by the bed. My father wasn't home, as he usually stayed over at his girlfriend's place. I didn't mind. It was nice to see him in love. It took the years off his face, and I didn't want to be the one to put those years back on with my predicament. I didn't want to see the look in his eyes if he saw branches of broken blood vessels, blossoms that ran up my arms in dull spirals of pain. Didn't want to see him and Blueberry in the same room. Didn't want him to feel disappointed or upset with me. I'd kicked the habit and worked diligently on my decision-making skills, but my helplessness in dealing with Blueberries seemed to me a return to a life I thought I'd left behind. No. Better to figure this out myself. He had spent enough sleepless nights worrying about me. Suddenly thankful for my parents' recent divorce. My mother stayed behind in the house I grew up in. My father had rented out a lovely house in an adjacent neighborhood. Blueberry couldn't possibly find me here. With that comforting thought, I pulled myself out of bed and got dressed. I remember picking a shirt with sleeves to cover those bruises that he'd left. I didn't care that it was easily 100 degrees outside. Anything to keep from seeing and remembering his brand on me. I padded towards the kitchen, stopping at the large glass window panes that faced the open schoolyard across the street. Pulling back the blinds, I took in the grassy, sun-drenched view. I liked the house. It was open. I could see anybody coming, but it was quiet for now. In the kitchen, I stepped into the cupboard and plucked a fresh bag of chips. I was starving. I had just started to pull open the bag of chips when the banging started. Boom, boom, boom. There was a parody of polite knocks. I had no idea how he'd found me. Still to this day, I don't. But it doesn't matter how, just that he did. But I knew who was behind that door, just as the person knew that I was hiding in there somewhere. At the very first echo of Blueberry's first hitting on the door, my legs turned to dust beneath me. The bag of chips burst as I collided with the linoleum. My body's momentum transformed the potato shards into a million traitors, echoing every move. I was sobbing silently, hiding behind the fridge and watching the shadow slide along the floor where I'd just been a second ago. Gazing out the window with that false sense of safety. Boom, boom, boom. Again. Then there was silence. My phone buzzed on the counter. I stretched my arm upward and clutched that little electronic beacon of freedom. A text. It was from a 303 area code. Colorado. Him. The text illuminated the screen.
My dear, I know you're in there. Let me in. I have your favorite Subway sandwich for you. And a surprise.
Jesus, how did he get my number? My sleeve has been pushed back from the reach for my phone. I see the bruises again. A friendly reminder from Blueberry. Some of them are the same shade as his name. The knocks have been quiet, and there's no more shadow on the wooden floor by the window. I remember that there was a click in my brain at the moment. Something finally connected. My survival instincts are finally triggered, and I shift from frozen into overdrive. I am no longer a human. I'm the fucking gazelle running from the lion. Chips crunch under my shoe as I snap up to my feet. Keys and phone in hand, and I run for the sake of everything that I love in this world. I hear the metal creak behind me, back in the kitchen just as I slam the front door open. All that sunlight outside charges every cell in my bruised body. From the front steps, I dive into my car from the open passenger side window. I leave a perfect arc of rubber marks on the driveway as I reverse, swivel my head and scan the yard for him. There's nowhere to hide in this wide open neighborhood. Nothing. He's unseen. The gas pedal is one with the floorboard. I'm thankful the students of the elementary school across the street are not out for recess, because I would have braided them into the sticky tarmac without a second thought if they'd stood between me and my safety. That is the level of my fear. I keep driving, blowing through all yields and stops. I wonder if I'm crazy. My phone buzzes with another text from that Colorado number. No, not crazy. Scared. Not of death. Not yet, anyway. Scared of what he will do to make me return to his normalcy. I am a doll to him. What happens when dolls start to speak? When they run like gazelles away from his playroom rules? What happens if the lion catches the gazelle? I dry heave and sob at once. Oh God, the fear. I feel like he's with me right now, watching. It does occur to me to call the police, but what do I tell them? They would look at me like I was crazy. Just like everyone else had assured me that Blueberry was fine. Just odd. So very odd. Maybe I still am the crazy one. I'm going 55 and a 25 after all. But I know that I can't be alone at this moment. I pick up my phone, dial the number for Brandon. He lives the closest. I have to redial twice. Blueberry keeps texting, and the alerts make me exit my keypad. His messages tell me about the lack of appreciation for the things that he does for me. Another dry heave. Still going 55. Finally, I'm able to input all 7 digits.
Hello?
Brandon's voice is an angelic sound. I cry. All that comes out is the name of the street that I'm on. He directs me to park a block away from where I am. I see him. He sees me. I leave the keys in the ignition, but turn the car off. I run across the green field to him. I feel like I can't do anything but run for dear life. Brandon catches me, holds me tight by the arms with big 2 hands. My bruises hurt under his palms. My lungs are on fire. Can't stop my legs from twitching. I babble. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. He found me. Please don't tell him where I am, Brandon. Please. I collapse on the soft grass. Brandon tells me later on that he pieced the story together from what he could hear me say, curled up in a fetal position in the grass, babbling about blueberries, bruises, and being an object. He wasn't sure what to make of all of it, and admitted that he thought I was back on the shit and was having a bad come down. He then goes to retrieve the keys to my car from the ignition. My phone is on the front seat, still lighting up incessantly with messages from that 303 number. Brandon sees this. He opens up my phone and reads several of the 52 messages sent in the last half hour. He said he couldn't bear to read anymore after seeing the one that included a photo of my open underwear drawer. It dawned on Brandon that Blueberry is inside my home and enjoyed letting me know. Brandon hugged me, talked to me until Carly and Kate got to the park. Carly and Kate took me to their house where they called the police. Brandon has warrants, so he can't be there with us. But before he leaves, he hugs me so fiercely it reminded me that I'm real, not plastic. He whispered into Carly's ear and advises her to check the messages on my phone if she doesn't believe. She makes it to the message where he tells me he will shave my red harlot's hair off if I don't come back and be good. My phone rings. Carly answers. It's my father. Kate drives my car home, and they stay as I hear what happened. The next door neighbor had been in her kitchen when he saw me run out the door and peel out of the driveway. The clue, she said, was how I'd thrown myself into the car through the window, as if I couldn't waste a minute with opening up the door. She went closer to her window to watch the scene. As my car faded away, she looked at the front door of the house and she saw a tall, thin man coming out the front door and staring into the direction I had just gone. She said he looked angry, and I looked terrified. She called the police. My father, unaware of all this, came home soon after the neighbor placed the call. Blueberry was back inside on the front porch by then, perched on the step, watching and waiting. My father stared at the strange boy on his steps. He saw the tire tracks in the absence of my car. Blueberry calmly looked up at my father, met his gaze, and blankly said that he was thinking about getting me a vanity for my birthday. My father told me that Blueberry stood up, placed himself between my dad and the door. My father was a criminal defense attorney for 30 years. He's a stoic, tough man who has defended countless rapists, killers, thieves, addicts, and the truly innocent before a jury of peers. Not much shakes him, but the tremor in my father's voice is perceptible as he tells me this. He stares Blueberry down and simply says, "Do you pay for this house, boy? I don't answer to you. Get out of my way." Blueberry moved. My father then went inside, disturbed by the boy on the stairs and glad that I wasn't home. In the kitchen, he sees the crushed bag of chips on the floor and the mess in the kitchen. He can see the signs of frantic movement etched into the carpeted chips. He can see that the back door is wide open. I would never leave it like that. He also remembers that the front door had been unlocked. He and I shared a paranoia of unlocked doors, and it was then that my father knew something was very wrong. He feels sick and sprints to the front door. "Hey, kid!" he roars at Blueberry, retreating back. He had taken off down the street when he heard the sirens. The police cars called by the neighbor pull up at this point. One patrol goes in pursuit of Blueberry. The other stays to talk with my father, who was calling my phone, and our astute neighbor, who related what she'd seen through the window. The police ask if I know this man, who was on our stairs. Carly gives my phone as an answer. My father sees one over the cop's shoulder, turns pale, and closes his eyes. I see the years go back on his face. I can't stop crying. I can't get a word out. All I can do is lead them all to my bedroom, where Carly holds up the bed skirt as I reach underneath and pull out all 3 keepsake boxes that I have filled with the last 5 years' worth of Blueberry's gifts, and mostly unopened letters. Carly brings me a yearbook. I cry harder and harder as I open up the page with his class photo on it and point at his full name. I'm crying this hard because it's over. I'm crying this hard because it could have been over long before this point. The officers bag up the contents of the boxes, and the flashes of cameras capture any traces of what had happened that afternoon. I give a short statement once I can speak coherently. They don't find Blueberry, but my father secures protective orders quickly with the connections that he has. He looks so tired. It must have been so easy to protect me when I was small, when he could be the barrier between me and the monsters he dealt with on a daily basis. But that time had long since passed. All he could do now was make phone calls and pray to a God that he did not believe in. He didn't tell me about the journal left on the doorstep until years later. The one that he didn't turn over to the police. The one that had the photos of me sleeping, photos of me naked and fresh out the shower, even some of me kissing my ex-boyfriend. Adam's face in these were scratched out and left hollow, all of them taken at times when I assumed I was alone. I arranged to stay the night with Carly. She told me in the morning that I started screaming in my sleep. It did not stop until she crawled into bed with me and wrapped me in her tiny arms. I am grateful to her. I think her touch is what kept me from remembering any nightmares that I had that night. It felt so good to just sleep. We moved soon afterwards, my father and I. We spoke of the incident only once more when I walked into the kitchen of the new house and saw my father at the table with a tumbler of bourbon in his hand, flipping through a mound of papers with the other. They were the letters from Blueberry. He had retrieved them after evidence processed them. He intended to put them in a safety deposit box. And I'll never forget the grim reasoning behind his voice as the lawyer in him spoke.
Well, if you ever turn up murdered, at least I'll have this and that fucking journal to prove exactly who did it.
I haven't seen or heard of Blueberry since that day. It's been 5 years, and it's taken 2 weeks of writing to get all of this out. There's so much to this story, and it's so fucking harrowing, yet relieving, to finally put all of this down together in chronological order and know that I lived through it. I live in Florida, and this incident happened about 3 weeks after Hurricane Irma, so not that long ago. Back in July, the ex and I had just finalized a divorce, and I moved into a gated neighborhood where every house was rented out by the same rental company. It's a very small neighborhood with about 15 houses tops. All 15 houses are bordered around a man-made lake with backyards facing that lake. No one really has a fenced backyard. When you walk out your back door, you see the lake in front of you and your neighbors' backyards on each side of you. Everyone in the neighborhood seemed very close. Someone was always hosting a family-friendly party or barbecue, or just having people over to watch sports. I was and still am depressed about my divorce, so I never really partook in any of these social gatherings. The only person I got to know was my next-door neighbor Steve, an active Navy soldier with a huge love for guns. Steve is the true hero in this nightmare. My daughter Alice is 4 years old, and I get her every other weekend. Alice's bedroom faces the backyard towards the lake. I spoil that girl to death. She is truly my everything, and I count down the days to the weekend every week just to be with her. It's why I was upset when Irma came and I had to go almost 3 weeks without seeing her. The weekend before the storm, she was with her mom. Then obviously the weekend of the storm, she was with her mom again. Then on top of that, the weekend after that, she had to be with her mom because my power was still out. No air conditioning in Florida is very miserable. The humidity was so bad that week that I slept in my daughter's room the entire time, because she has the only room with a window that faced the lake. I opened the window, exposing just the window screen, so that the wind from the lake could cool the room as much as possible while I slept. Eventually, the power comes back and Alice starts visiting me again, like normal. That was when the nightmares started. My daughter would complain about the singing lady and how she doesn't like her anymore. I thought maybe she was just referring to one of my ex's friends or one of the teachers at her school. Maybe there was a teacher at her school that sang to the kids that she didn't like. That Saturday night, Alice woke up in the middle of the night screaming bloody murder. I ran into her room and turned on the light, found her hiding underneath her covers. I asked her what was wrong, and all she could do was point to the empty corner of her room and say, "Look, look!" There was nothing there. She was acting as if she saw a ghost. After I calmed her down, she started to talk to me about the singing lady again.
Please tell me the singing lady is not coming back. Please, Daddy, make her go away.
Obviously, she's having nightmares, right? I showed her that there was nothing in the closet, nothing under the bed, and there was nothing to be afraid of. She finally calmed down and went back to sleep. I went back to my room and quickly fell back asleep myself. It couldn't have been more than 20 minutes before she came running into my room and screaming,
She's back! She's back!
Alice absolutely refused to go back to her room, so I let her sleep with me that night. The next morning, Sunday morning, I took Alice out to breakfast and we stopped by Target to pick up a baby monitor. I haven't used one of those since her mom and I were still married, but I wanted to easily be able to hear her if and when she started having these nightmares again, so that I could respond quicker. After I set them up, I showed Alice how they worked, to give her reassurance that I could hear her and she was safe. That night, she slept soundly and didn't make a peep all night long. The following weekend, Alice had to stay with her mother again because she caught a stomach virus from one of her little friends at school. It was a Saturday night. I was sound asleep in my bed. Around 2 a.m. is when I heard it. A woman's voice humming a soft nursery rhyme through the baby monitor. The humming/singing got louder and clearer as the voice got closer and closer to the monitor. I wasn't dreaming. I could hear a woman softly singing lullabies in my daughter's bedroom. I'd never been more scared and dumbfounded in my entire life. I was feeling a mixture of pure terror and disbelief. Then the voice spoke out.
Alice, sweetie, are you awake?
Adrenaline shot through my veins. I jumped out of my bed, locked my bedroom door, and picked up my cell and called Steve from next door. He didn't waste a second. As soon as I got off the phone with him, I heard him storm out his back door screaming,
Don't you fucking move!
I ran outside and found him aiming his shotgun at a woman crouched outside my daughter's window, the one I'd left open after Irma and never closed. Steve quickly dropped his guard when he recognized the woman. It was Jean, the neighborhood maintenance man/woman. Steve's wife came running out after him and confirmed it was her. Jean played dumb. She said she was not singing and didn't even know my daughter's name. She said she was near my daughter's window because she was doing her weekly patrols for gators and thought she saw one approach our house from the lake. Bull fucking shit. That bitch was singing, and she called out to my daughter by name. Yeah, it's true there have been a few gators spotted around the neighborhood, and it is part of her job to patrol the lake at night every now and then. But at 2 a.m., I obviously knew this was bullshit, and even though neither Steve or his wife called her out on it, I could tell by the look on both of their faces that they didn't believe her either. The next morning, I went over to Steve's house to thank him and tell him exactly what had happened. He told me Jean and her husband have been known to be a little cuckoo, but this is by far the craziest thing to happen so far. Steve helped me install metal bars on Alice's window that afternoon. When I was a teenager, I was goth. Black hair, black clothes, black makeup, even had a pair of combat boots. My friends and I, in typical goth fashion, hung out at the local cemetery. We started going as a joke, but soon discovered we liked the peace that we found there. But that all changed one night. My friend called to see if I wanted to hang out, and I did. None of our other friends were available. They were either working or recovering from the partying the night before, so we were on our own. My best friend picked me up and we drove out to the cemetery. We were hanging out, smoking cigs and just BSing about the latest issues she was having with her boyfriend, when we noticed at the top of the hill that we were on, maybe 100 feet away, a bonfire had been lit. You have to understand that this cemetery is about a block off a campus of a major university, and it's not uncommon for college students to go there to party. My friend and I sighed, knowing that we would have to get going soon. It was illegal to be in a cemetery after dark, and we knew the police would show up because some jerks had decided they needed a bonfire. We decided to finish off our cigs and then take off. Just then, the most horrible stench came wafting down the hill from the direction of that bonfire. My friend gagged and covered her mouth, and I groaned and said, "What the hell?" My friend shook her head, saying,
I don't know what they're doing. Let's just leave.
We get in the car and one of us suggested, I don't remember who, maybe we should just go up and see what they're doing, you know? My stomach turned, and a cold shiver went through my body. My friend must have had that same feeling because at the same time we both said, no, we should leave. My friend turned her car on, switched her headlights on, and put the car in reverse, and looked over her shoulder before starting to back up. I was still looking up the hill. A figure stepped in front of the bonfire. I could only see a silhouette, but I was sure whoever it was watching us. A feeling of terror hit me and I said, "Go, go, go, go!" Getting louder and more panicked with each word. My friend looked back up the hill for a second. And just as the figure took a step towards us, she slammed on the gas and peeled out, going in reverse down that hill. She rammed the gear into drive and we were out. We didn't say anything for a while until she said,
What the hell were they burning?
"I don't know." She dropped me off at home and I went to bed. The next morning I woke up and went out to the kitchen. My mom was there, drinking her morning coffee, and I joined her. We talked about her job for a bit when suddenly she comes out with,
Did you hear what happened last night?
I shrug and say, "No, I just gotten up." She tells me that a woman she worked with was kidnapped from the parking garage. "Oh my God," I say. Did they find her?" "Yes, but too late," she replied. "Whoever took her had raped and murdered her. They found her this morning up on the cemetery. He tried to dispose of her body in a bonfire." I froze. My brain was going a mile a minute. The realization slowly creeping up. That's what that smell was. Needless to say, I never hung out at the cemetery at night again. I think back to our decision to leave instead of investigating the fire. That one decision could have changed everything. Dark silhouette in the bonfire? Let's not meet. I want to start by saying that this isn't the first bad experience that I've had dog sitting, but it's definitely the worst. I started dog sitting back when I was 13 and made good money doing it. I'm currently 19 and this happened when I was 18. I set up an easy way for people to contact me about dog sitting. I put out a post on Facebook and Instagram, hoping it would get people in my messages to ask to dog sit. I got a notification from Instagram one day, starting with someone trying to message me. I accepted it, and the message simply said, "Me and my wife are looking to find a dog sitter while we go away for a week to Florida. You will have to work the 4th through the 11th this month. We will pay you $300 for the week. You're welcome to stay at our house or go back to your own." I started talking back and forth with this man. We're going to call him Mr. Brown for the sake of privacy. So I agreed to take the gig and told him that I would stay at his house for the week. Once I got to his house, I was introduced to his 2 dogs, Mina and Letty. Mina was a little Yorkie and Letty was a blue hound. I was shown around the house, which was surrounded by 76 acres. I live in a farm town and live on 32 acres myself, so staying here really didn't freak me out. The closest neighbors were pretty far away, and you would actually have to drive there if you wanted to talk to them. They told me the rules and told me when to feed them, blah blah blah, all that stuff. Then, Mrs. Brown told me about the nearest neighbor. In her words, she was a nice person that was just a little drugged up and confused. She mentioned how sometimes she would pull into their driveway instead of hers, and would somehow end up mistaking Mrs. Brown for her dead daughter. Hearing this made me feel really bad for her, and I know all too well how hard it is for parents to lose their child because of how my parents were after losing my brother in a car accident. Mrs. Brown said she didn't do anything bad though, and if she came up to the house, just point her back at her own home, and she would leave with no problems. After they left, I was down to watch movies and just chill with the dogs. The first 2 days were fine, with no hiccups. The 3rd day, however, the old woman who I'll call Mrs. Rose did pull into the driveway. I came outside as she was getting out of the car. She looked up to see me and immediately got back in her car and left. I chalked it up to her realizing it was the wrong house when she saw me and then went back inside. Later that night, though, I got a call from Mrs. Brown asking if I was okay. I said yes and asked her why. She went on to tell me that she got a call from Mrs. Rose and that she said that there was a robber at her house. I explained to her the situation that happened earlier, and she just laughed and said she must have been confused and forgot that they were out of town. I ended the phone call by making a note to go over there tomorrow to clear the air about me being a quote-unquote robber. Once I went to bed that night, things got really crazy. I woke up around 2, hearing a light scratching sound that almost sounded like a ticking coming from outside the window. At first I thought it might have been a bird or something and just left it alone, but the noise kept me from falling back asleep, and I wanted to scare it away, so I got up and went to the blinds. When I lifted them, I screamed at the sight of Mrs. Rose, trying to pry the window open with a pair of pliers. The dog started barking now, and I quickly got up, told the dogs to follow me, and grabbed the phone and ran to a room with no windows, which was the bathroom, and locking the door just in case she got in. I called 911 and explained the situation to them, quickly giving them the address from what I could remember. She told me that there would be police there in 10 minutes, which for the area I was in is actually a pretty good response time. I'd gotten the dogs to be quiet and put them in a closet connected to the bathroom to make sure that she didn't hear them. I was trying to stay calm, and I could still hear her pounding on the window as I continued to talk to the operator. I then heard glass shatter. I cursed under my breath, trying not to cry. I was really scared and pretty much ready to cry from the fear of being beaten to death by someone who was clearly not in the right state of mind. I was whispering what was happening to the operator, hiding in the back of the bathroom in the tub. After about 4 minutes of pretty much silence, I heard footsteps, and I could see feet underneath the other side of the door, and I cursed to myself again. I then see Mrs. Rose get on her hands looking under the crack, and I mistakenly let out a gasp. She quickly got up and started pounding at the door. I could tell she was still using those pliers, and I'm at this point crying and asking the operator where the hell the police are. She said they were 3 minutes out. Those 3 minutes felt like forever. I screamed at Mrs. Rose to please go away, and she screamed back that I shouldn't be here. Once I heard the sound of police cars, and about a minute later, them trying to kick down the door, I felt a little better. The operator told me to stay on the line until the intruder was caught, and that the police were not trying to get into the house. Eventually they did get in though, and I yelled to get their attention. Not that they really needed it, she was still banging on the door. Once they got into the room she was, they told her to drop her weapon. She obeyed, saying that she didn't do anything wrong. They put her in handcuffs, and a police officer told me it was okay to unlock the door, to which I did slowly. After being taken to the police station and giving them my story for the report, I went to my parents' house just because I was too scared to be alone. The next day, I called Mrs. Brown and explained the whole situation. I got full payment, even after telling them that I wasn't going back to the house. They called me a few days later saying that Mrs. Rose was under the influence of drugs, and in her words, she told the police that she was going to take care of the robber and that she did nothing wrong. She was charged with breaking and entering, which is kind of ironic. After that, I quit dog sitting, and I'm a lot more paranoid, and always make sure that my doors and windows are locked at all times. So Mrs. Rose, wherever you are, let's not meet again. This is by far the scariest, most bizarre situation that I've ever been in, and after lurking here for so long, I just have to share it with you. My boyfriend Dan and I had just started renting in an apartment together, and money was really tight. It was 2001, and we were both in our early 20s. I couldn't find a job and relied on word of mouth to earn some cash wherever I could. I love to clean and organize, so I gave friends and family the go-ahead to give out my name and number to anyone who could use my help over the summer. Dan, his brother and dad did carpentry work and also got work through word of mouth. None of them had too many exciting stories to tell other than work in a hoarder's home or odd requests as far as cabinet design or placement. Dan got a call from an elderly woman wondering if he could come by and give her an estimate on finishing her kitchen. She said her husband died before he could install the cabinets and countertop that he'd purchased, and someone from church gave her his number. He told her absolutely and offered to come out the next day. She objected and said,
This needs to be done now. That's why I called. They said you could help me. What am I supposed to do? I'm an old woman. I live all alone. My husband died.
Dan was a really chill guy and kept calm, explaining that I had his car and that I was out running errands and would be gone for a couple of more hours, and by the time I was home, it would be much too dark for him to come out. Let me also note that although Dan had a soft, not very masculine voice, he was a big guy, about 6'4" and very muscular. The old lady perked up and asked,
Will she be coming along tomorrow?
in the sweetest voice. Dan said looking back, this should have been a red flag by the tone of her voice, and the fact that she was so adamant about him coming right at that moment. But as soon as she heard that he had a girlfriend, she changed her tune, got excitement in her voice, and was asking about the next day like it was no problem for her to not wait. In the moment, he didn't see anything weird about it, and he felt bad for her because he thought she must have been lonely and just wanting some kind of company to talk to. The next day, we both headed to her house. We brought along a small bouquet of flowers that we'd gotten at the grocery store to give to her. I figured she would enjoy chatting while Dan checked out her kitchen, and maybe I could come with Dan and help her with other things around the house while he worked, if she needed it. Her township was about 45 minutes away, but I was excited to go because this township is well known to have really old houses and mansions. There were other normal subdivisions, depending on what direction you drive in. My friends and I, back in high school, used to drive there just to cruise around and look at all the neat houses. When we pulled up to the old lady's house, I was eager to still go inside because it was such a cute looking house from the outside. Very fairy tale-ish, gray with white trim, and vines climbing up the side of the house. It was a shotgun style house, so it looked tiny from the front. The small lawn was overgrown and messy, but I thought it added to the charm of the home. We knock on the door and are greeted by a tiny elderly woman, shorter than me, and I'm 5 foot. She had on a dirty nightgown and even dirtier slippers. She looked past Dan and smiled wildly at me, while reaching her bony hands out to grab my face. I held up the flowers to deflect and say, Dan wanted to bring you some flowers. She lost her smile, grabbed the flowers and said, Kitchen's through here. She turned and led us, revealing a brown stain on the back of her nightgown. Dan and I looked at one another, and he makes a grossed out face. I make a judgmental face and swat his arm as if to say, Be nice, she's an old woman. We walked through a dark living room. Nothing really out of the ordinary other than the smell, which was like cigarettes, mold, and body odor. We enter the kitchen, and there's a closed door about 10 to 12 feet ahead leading into rooms further back into the house. There's a man sitting shirtless at the table in the kitchen. He was hairy and overweight with greasy hair down to his shoulders. The old lady said, This is my son Marcus. He was probably in his late 30s, early 40s. He said nothing, but stood up and took his bowl to the sink. Great. Marcus has no pants on, just dirty, and I mean dirty, tidy whities with several holes around the waistband. I shoot Dan that same grossed out look that he shot me earlier, and he jokingly shoots back a judgmental look and swats my arm. I give him a, no seriously, I'm creeped out look, and he nods to acknowledge it. So what cabinets are you? Dan tried to ask, but was interrupted with Marcus pointing to the flowers and asking the old lady, Where are those from? She points to Dan, and Marcus snatches the flowers out of her hand and throws them into a trash bag on the floor, and then walked out of the kitchen back into the living room that we had just walked through. He had just lost his dad, so I assumed he had some sort of mental disability and was being sensitive about another dude showing his mom attention. So where are the cabinets and countertop that you need installed? Dan asked the old woman. I thought you were bringing them, she huffed out, sounding shocked that he would even ask that. I'm sorry, I thought you said your husband bought them and you needed them installed, Dan said, confused and a bit nervous about how the woman was reacting. So you brought nothing. What is it you do? What is it you're going to try to sell me? She gets closer to Dan as she's throwing her hands up in disbelief and anger. Marcus then comes quickly stomping in at the sound of his mother's distress. Rushing in from the other door past the kitchen was another man, around the same age. Wonderful. This guy's in his underwear too, dirty tighty-whities as well. This woman told Dan on the phone that she lived all alone. This new guy freezes just past the doorway and just stares at me, standing feet away. Marcus rushed forward and stands between us and his mother and pushes her out towards the living room. Now, both doors are blocked by the fucking tighty-whitey twins. Dan scoops me up behind him in an attempt to block me from both guys. "We're gonna be heading out now," he said calmly, hoping not to escalate things. We hear the old lady squawk out loud, "Ha!" from the living room. Marcus doesn't move. "I'll see what I can do about the cabinets," Dan said as we inch forward. Marcus barely inches forward but still blocks the way. I frantically tug on Dan's arm to get him to look over at the other guy, now with his hands down his dirty under rag, masturbating. That's when my calm, chill boyfriend loses it. I've never heard him scream like this. And he remembered from growing up how his brothers taught him how to deal with bullies. Say some crazy messed up shit to them, and they'll be too stunned to react. So Dan screamed with rage. "The last person that cornered me got beat to fucking death. I'll fucking kill you and your fucking mom if you don't get the fuck out of my way." Veins popping, spit flying. Marcus looked surprised. He rushed past us towards his brother, and for a split second, we both thought he was going to attack Dan. So he instinctively threw up his fist to defend himself. Marcus pushes past his brother into the other room and slams the door behind him. Dan and I hurry out of the house. I think the old lady was sitting in the dark living room, but I didn't stop to look around as we were scurrying out. We called the cops when we got home, but nothing really came out of it because they said they didn't really do anything wrong. He didn't expose himself. They didn't try to attack us. They agreed that it was bizarre, but nothing they could really do. We asked around. No one knew these people. We're not so sure how she actually got our number. I don't know if they were just mentally ill or if she lied on purpose to get us over there, or why any of this stuff happened the way it did. It was just really scary, feeling boxed in and not knowing what these creepy, almost naked dudes were thinking. Ever since then, I tend to avoid going inside other people's houses unless I really, truly know them. My family has a camping timeshare and we used to go camping for weeks at a time during the summer. My dad had to work, so he would stay home Monday through Thursday and then come meet us at the campgrounds Friday through Sunday. The campgrounds had a pool, a miniature golf course, basketball courts. And we'd gone for so long that my mom was comfortable letting us wander around since there was only one entrance and exit. When I was around 8, but small for my age, so I looked around 5, I met a little boy who was camping with his single dad for a few days. He came to our campsite a lot and knew we were staying for a while. I was pretty sad when he left, but his dad told me that they'd come back sometime soon. A few weeks later, his dad came to the campsite right after my mom left to take a shower. He told me that his son was coming later that week. He asked where my parents were, and I told him that my dad doesn't come until Friday. My mom always takes a shower at this time. He then told me goodbye and left. The next day, he came by at the exact same time and told me that he just found some kittens and asked if I wanted one. I told him yes, and he told me that he kept them in his tent and I could come pick one. Now, this guy wasn't a stranger. My mom had met him when he picked up his son from our campsite, so I immediately didn't get that creepy stranger danger vibe and get going with him. We walked towards his campsite, but then he told me he actually moved them to his truck so they wouldn't get hot, which in the moment made sense to me. He pointed to his truck right outside the gates of the entrance. As I'm walking towards it, my dad suddenly pulls up. He'd gotten the day off of work so he could spend more time with us. He then asks, "What's going on?" And I say, "Tommy's dad said he has kittens in his truck and then I can have one." My dad gets out of his car and tells me, "Run back to the campsite." So I do. A little while later, my dad gets back to the campsite himself and tells me, "Never go alone with an adult anywhere, even if I know them." I asked my mom years later about the whole thing. She told me my dad beat that guy's ass and then called the cops. This happened to my roommate and I 2 years ago when we drove into the national forest just outside the town we live in. We go to a small college in New England, about 3 hours from any major city. For context, this forest has quite a few urban legends surrounding it and the local community. Although they don't go there often, I have a lot of superstitions about how to be safe while there. I had just broken up with my partner and my roommate could sense I was feeling down. Finals were just around the corner, so she decided to help me get my mind off of things and suggested we go to a nice spot that she had found last week. Just chill and de-stress. We took a couple of beers with us and drove to the secluded spot in that forest. From the moment we left the main asphalt road into the forest, I saw a couple of things that unsettled me. You could see the abandoned houses of a ghost town from the higher ground that the road was on. And we saw this old doll hanging from a rope on a tree. Creepy, but I really didn't give it much of a second thought and just kept driving. We got to a clearing, parked our car behind some trees, popped up the back of our SUV, and just started talking and playing some music. About 10 minutes into this, 2 cars appeared from the road and parked in the clearing. My friend didn't pay them attention, instead just kept talking, but I was facing them from where I sat. I couldn't stop seeing what they were doing. A guy popped out of each car, talked for a few minutes, and then I saw them take out a long object covered in dark plastic bag from one of their cars. This is when I noticed these guys had guns. Not like shotguns that you see often in this town, but handguns. And they started lighting the bag on fire. I told my friend to get down. She turned around and saw them for the first time. Black smoke was rising from the bag, and between trying to keep my head down and steal glances at them, I saw them take out a second object. I heard them shoot it right before they set that on fire. I don't know how long my friend and I were lying there in silence, but it was definitely enough to let the terror sink in and whisper to each other how much we loved each other, just in case we thought what we thought was going to happen. At some point I looked up and saw that they were pointing at our car and saw them walking into the woods, maybe trying to follow our tracks or trying to look for us. All I know is, right then, I told my friend to jump in the driver's seat and make a run for it. I shut the back door, and between that and the car starting up, the guys then heard it and started running toward us, then ran towards one of their cars and hopped in. We went over a hill and driving way above what was safe for dirt roads on the hillside, and thankfully we lost them. We drove into a neighboring town and roamed around for a while, just to make sure that no one was following us before we went back to our dorm. That day, we tried to make fun of the whole situation and got really drunk before finally breaking down and crying from knowing what we'd seen, and we knew it was something we weren't supposed to. First, we were terrified of telling anyone, but eventually did tell officers on the campus who contacted the police, but never found out anything else. So I was driving by myself on a highway in Maine, cranking killer tunes and slamming Mountain Dew big gulps and sucking back on some American Spirit lights. I decided to go hog wild at a Taco Bell drive-thru, ordered an enormous amount of food, extra fixins. Live Moss. Of course, about 40 minutes after I ate, my stomach began seizing and cramping. There was to be no refunds, no returns. Luckily, I see a rest stop coming in about 2 miles. I floor it and pull in. It's about 1:30 a.m. and it seems pretty vacant. There's only one other vehicle in the lot. Windows steamed up. I assume it's just another road tripper who had to pull over to rub one out. We've all been there. No judgment. I get out of my car and run into the men's room. I was holding the bottom of my pants when I ran in, because I wasn't sure I was going to make it. Finally, I'm in the stall, and it's not a good scene. Figuring I would be in there for a while, I brought my smokes and a copy of Mad Magazine. I always keep in my car for emergencies like this. I'm working on my fourth American Spirit when I hear another person come in. Footsteps stop. I can hear them taking deep breaths. I holler out, "Hey man, I'd keep those breaths shallow." No response. I can see the dude's feet in front of the stall. They're fucking huge. Gotta be at least a size 17. Dirty as shit too. I sat in silence staring at these huge shoes. A sudden ass blast squeeze out, and the sound echoes in the empty restroom. All of a sudden, the guy starts pounding on the door, then grabbing the top and shaking it. "I'll be out in a minute, you spaz!" I screamed. Then it stopped. I hear the footsteps again and then a lot of squeaking. Then footsteps again, and the door opening and slamming shut. Of course, there was no toilet paper in the stall. It was not a clean pinch as you can imagine. I had to use my Mad Magazine. Alfred E. Newman has never been so disrespected. I exited the stall and seen marker written on the mirror, "See you outside." And it was signed Nitro. I'm born and bred in Maine. I've met a lot of guys who go by Nitro. Not a one do I want to meet alone at a rest stop in the middle of fucking nowhere. I'm terrified. I hatch a plan that I'm just gonna go for it. I opened up the restroom doors and sprint to my car. Not looking back, I just run. I hear a shuffle and footsteps behind me. "Ah!" I hear behind me. I'd left my car unlocked because it's a piece of shit, and I get right in. I get in the car going to do a bit of a burnout and speed off. I see in my rearview mirror the silhouette of a massive man. He threw his hat on the ground and began jumping up and down as I sped down the highway. No idea what this guy's intentions were, but this was easily a top 5 scary moment for me. I can't really bring myself to poop in a public restroom sense. I recently received a friend request that reminded me of this story, so I'm going to share it here. This happened after I went to university, so I was 18 at the time. I made an effort to make friends after I moved onto campus, and ended up with a few groups to hang out with, including a new girlfriend, and plenty of people from my classes that I liked well enough. There was this one class before lunch where it was traditional for people to go to the cafeteria afterwards to eat in pairs or threes. I wasn't very discerning about who I'd have lunch with because I got on fine with most people from the class, and we were all trying to make an effort to be social. So when one girl, Lily, asked if I wanted to eat lunch together after that class, I didn't have any reason not to go. We talked about school and that kind of thing. Nothing noteworthy, but she did ask me to go to lunch with her again the next week. It became a pattern. There wasn't exactly a way to start saying no suddenly. It was fine, but it did mean I lost the chance to eat lunch with anyone else on those days. In hindsight, I suppose that was the point. One day in class, I asked someone if I could add them on social media. This happened in front of Lily. I saw her face jerk toward me from a couple of seats over. It was such a sharp reaction that it was hard to ignore, and I still remember it. By the time I got home later that day, Lily had sent me a friend request. No friends in common. Don't know how she knew my last name. I was a bit surprised, but I guess that she dug through the university's social media pages and found me through there. It gave me a bad feeling, but surely it was fine, right? She ended up messaging me a lot and commenting on anything that I posted. I told myself that she was just awkward and we became friends, if not close. I'd known worse people. She still always got me to go eat lunch with her after our one shared class. Other than that, we rarely spent time together in person. I saw her around sometimes, but I never went out of my way to hang out with her. so it was mostly online messaging and seeing each other in group settings. Coincidentally, my girlfriend was also named Lily. This was something that clearly bothered Lily, not my girlfriend Lily, who could have found it less interesting. It's a pretty common name. She occasionally hinted that she wanted my girlfriend to pick a different name, or joked about her not suiting it. She clearly didn't like my girlfriend at all, and I had an idea of why. It was kind of hard to ignore at this point. Lily was starting to unsubtly hint that she had a crush on me. I tried to not address it, but what was I gonna say? I've never known what to do when a friends make a pass at me. I was also not interested in the least, even ignoring the weird stuff she pulled. She was not my type at all. She tended to dress and act in a way somewhere between a 50s housewife and one of those adults who still is obsessed with Disney princesses, if you can even picture that. Things took an uncomfortable turn on the day of our last shared class of the year. Instead of asking me to lunch like she normally did, Lily asked if I'd go for a walk with her. Again, I didn't exactly know how to refuse, so I just said alright. Our campus was bordered by a large patch of woodland. Lily led me into the woods, and the sounds of our fellow students slowly faded away. She sat down on a log, and I joined her. She started talking about how she was going to miss me over the summer. I tried placating her, but I didn't want to be there, especially because she seemed almost on the verge of tears. I think I tried to make an excuse about having plans with my girlfriend, but before I could leave, Lily chose to kiss me without warning. It was uncomfortable to say the least. I just got out of there and was happy to think I wouldn't see her again for quite a while. I came back to the university after summer, moving into a house with my friends. Without going off topic, there were some serious issues within my friend group. A lot of petty arguing and worse. I broke up with my girlfriend around the start of that year as well. And basically, the whole mess made me recontextualize things with Lily because it suddenly didn't seem as bad. With all that being said, I didn't want to be alone with her. We mostly just talked online. She was still constantly messaging me after all. One upside of everything was that I started dating a boy. Lily was not pleased to hear that news. I think she hoped to sneak in after I broke up with my girlfriend. Like I said before, that was never going to happen. There wasn't a big gap between my breakup and this new relationship, so she must have thought she missed her chance to be with me. And this is where the story gets pretty bad. At this time, I was fairly active on Tumblr. I occasionally talked about my life and mostly reblogged photos and stuff. I was on there one day when something kind of odd happened. One of the blogs I followed had received an ask with some phrases that I recognized. I took a second to register that it was taken from my About page. That made me freeze. I read the message properly. Someone was asking this completely random person to analyze a section of text from my page, asking for their opinion on the type of person who would write it. I cannot stress how messed up it was to see people talking about me like I was a character in some book that they were trying to study. The reply was basically, I don't know, sorry. But more important thing was that the question hadn't been anonymous. It was linked to someone's blog. Obviously, I wanted to know who had taken such a bizarre interest in me. As far as I knew, no one in real life, other than my boyfriend, knew about my page at all. Well, no prizes for guessing who was behind it. What I found was like a shrine. She was using a fake name, but I recognized Lily all over that thing. It was this cutesy pink and red page. There were a few posts about her interest, but most of the content was focused on her primary interest, me. Most of the posts were about me. There were accounts of things that I'd done recently, as well as references to things from far back as I'd known her. It was clear she'd been keeping tabs on me, both online and offline, gathering up every scrap of information she could about my life and hoarding it here in her collection. She talked about us eating lunch together and how special our dates had been to her, as if it was actually anything more than just acquaintances getting food after class. She talked about the time she'd forcibly kissed me in the woods, but she wrote it as if it had been mutual, She quoted lyrics from my favorite song and talked about how she'd always been there for me, no matter who else came into my life. Lots of references to loving me just the way he is, which answered another mystery about an anonymous love letter I received earlier that year with that same wording. It got worse. There were a lot of posts about my boyfriend as well, and those weren't so nice. They got vicious, talking about how he didn't deserve me. He didn't know what he had, and if she was me, she'd be jealous of anyone else who came near me. So my boyfriend, not being a jealous person, meant he didn't love me. He was angry and hateful. I didn't like to think about the sort of person who could write something so obsessively, being fixated on me. There was one thing that didn't make sense at first. It was that the blog also made plenty of references to Lily's best friend, Steven. She had never mentioned this person to me. Her post talked a lot about Steven and how great a friend he was, how much fun they had together, how he looked out for her, etc. I was trying to work out whether this was an online friend when one specific post made it all click. She had posted a photo that captioned it with, "Steven sent this to me. He knew I would like it, and I love it," or something like that. The problem was, the photo was taken from my own page, and I hadn't sent it to her. She took it from my page and then claimed this fictional best friend of hers shared it with her, because in her head, she'd split me into two people. In her messed up fantasy life, I was both the perfect best friend who was always looking out for her, as well as her soulmate who was bound to end up with her when I finally got over my sweet and kind boyfriend, and all the other easy girls I hung out with. She made dozens of posts complaining about. Who was she complaining to? Oh, Lily had an audience. She asked open questions about me and her relationship with me, and got messages back from her followers. People who took what she said at face value. I saw a bunch of random people agreeing with this stalker that my boyfriend didn't deserve me, and that we were bound to break up soon so I could be with Lily, the person I was clearly supposed to be with. She had this fake fan fiction version of my life up for anyone to share their opinion on, and she'd made herself out to be the hero of it all. I went maybe a month back into the page's history. I did not look at everything that was there. It was just too much. So, I'm not sure how long this had been going on actually. I sent Lily a message confronting her about the blog. She said nothing, and I cannot stress how weird it was to have found pages and pages dedicated to me, with her all the while talking about how she was in love with me and would make sure that we ended up together somehow, and slamming my boyfriend, as well as building a fantasy life with two different versions of me in it. She clearly believed to be real, then acting like it hadn't happened. She said nothing still. She didn't address it. She just changed the subject, even after I pushed it, and was like, she hadn't even registered what I even said. I've never seen anything else like it. She deleted the page, of course, or at least changed the name and hid it so I never found it again. But it wasn't the end though. I wasn't going to hang out with her anymore, but we were still shoved together in classes, and she had started to actually scare me with what she might do next. I'm kind of a paranoid person. Knowing someone was obsessively keeping track of me for who knows how long freaked me out. The next thing that she tried to pull was seduce my boyfriend, which was an absolute useless attempt that only made him uncomfortable. He told me about it right away. What was her plan there? Did she hope to tell me he cheated and wait for me to break up with him? Why would I want her after that? When that didn't work out for her, she tried hitting on 3 of my other friends, and none of them took the bait. She ended up dating one of my former housemates for a while, but made sure to send me messages while they were together, letting me know that she'd rather be with me. No thanks. Lily made sure to stay in my life the whole time I was at university. There was a time when I tried to pull away from her, and she ended up starting rumors about me and damaging a career opportunity that I put a lot of work into. I don't know what else she did behind my back, but it made me realize I was safer to let her think that she was a part of my life while ignoring her, rather than doing something that would get her to get angry. After I graduated, Lily still wanted to spend time together, but I knew I didn't have time now. I made excuses about work and barely talked to her after that point. I almost entirely stopped posting on social media that she knew about. Of course, she didn't give up that easily. She tried to start conversations, asked me to meet up with her, attempts which I usually ignored. I didn't like to think that she was still tracking me online, but she probably was. I don't know how, but she'd occasionally reference things that I mentioned online somewhere she shouldn't have known about. The last time we had a real conversation, she sent me a message out of nowhere. We hadn't spoken at all in months, and we hadn't talked about anything serious in much longer than that. Just thinking about that conversation still makes my skin crawl, but I'll summarize what had happened. At first, she was asking me some questions about how long I'd known I was queer. I told her some basic stuff, the kind of thing I'd tell anyone who asked. Then she changed the subject. She started talking to me about how I would feel about her if she was a boy, about wanting to be a boy for me. She went into plenty of detail about fantasies she'd had about the two of us. Again, we were not friends at this point, and we'd never been especially close, at least not from my perspective. And again, we hadn't barely spoken for years. I can't imagine sending messages like that to even a close friend, let alone someone who barely even knows you. I tried telling her not to pull this crap with me, but she decided to change tactics. She sent photos of herself, followed by a bunch of messages, maybe 4 or 5 a minute, way too fast for me to reply before the next one would arrive. Basically quoting back what I'd told her about myself and my past earlier. She was telling me these things as if they happened to her. She was role-playing as me. The worst part was that she seemed to believe that it was real, that those things actually happened to her. Even when she was quoting me word for word, things I'd told her only hours before were now her life. It was like she was trying to absorb my history, to take it over, to make my life part of her. Yeah, I didn't talk to her again after that. I ignored future attempts she made to talk to me, and I eventually silently deleted her from inactive social medias, which was her only real way of contacting me. I really thought she finally might move on. A few days ago, she sent me another friend request. It's just sitting there, unanswered, because I know if I delete it, she'll only send another one. Lily and I met nearly 12 years ago. This story is just the highlights, and even then, it's the only stuff I know about. A lot happened behind my back. I know it did. So, girl who spent 12 years obsessing over me, stalking me, harassing me, fantasizing about me. It's not meet again. The fantasy life you built for the two of us is in your head, and it's the only place you'll be seeing me anytime soon. When I was around 7 to 8 years old, I was visiting my grandparents with 2 of my cousins. The house was very secluded on the outskirts of a rural town. My mom, grandmother, and aunt were busy downstairs in a back room spring cleaning, and us 3 girls were playing upstairs. Taking a lunch break, my aunt called out to us from the upstairs kitchen. We walked into the kitchen and she asked us if we'd been in her purse to play with her wallet. We told her no, and she thought some money was missing, around $20. So my cousin and I volunteered to look for the money inside her car, just in case it fell out. We went to her car and looked around, and found nothing. My cousin accidentally slammed the door, and she told me, "Shh, don't tell my mom. She hates when I slam the door." I agreed, and we went back upstairs. Minutes passed, and we all started making sandwiches. My mother looked out the window and said, "Girls, you left the car door open." We ran to the window and we kind of froze for a second, and we assured them that we did not leave any car door open and confessed to actually slamming the door that was open. At first, things started to feel creepy. First the wallet, now the car door. After watching the car for a while, we didn't see anyone, and my mom bravely said that she would close the door so the interior lights wouldn't run the battery down. She went outside and closed the door. The landline to the house rang. My grandmother answered and her face turned completely white. She started yelling for her mother to get in the house and lock the door now. We all got upstairs and we hunkered down in the corner of the room while my grandmother called 911. My mother reported feeling someone watching her when she was closing that car door. She also thought she saw a shadow inside her Astro van that had tinted windows. Someone unknown to my grandmother on the phone said,
"I know you're in there."
and hung up. At this point, we're all scared and crying, waiting 30 to 45 minutes for the police to show up. When we finally see a police officer in the driveway, we all run outside. He starts taking a report of what had happened with the money, the car door, and the phone call, as he's writing everything down. I yell to my mom that there's smoke coming from the top of the house, on the back side, so my grandmother freaks out, thinking that she left a pot of beans on the stove and maybe the kitchen caught on fire. The police officer looks up to see the smoke for himself. He calls in the fire department and then runs inside the house, instructing everyone to stay outside. Moments later, he comes back outside and is completely bewildered. Nothing was on fire, and the smoke outside is now gone. The fire department and backup police arrive. They search the house and the nearby land. Nothing. To this day, we have no clue what happened, who that person was and where they went, and how they knew my grandmother's phone number, and what caused that smoke. The only speculation we made was the phone call was probably made from inside our van, as we had a mobile bag phone. I was terrified as a kid and still shudder when thinking back on this. This is actually my stepmom's and her best friend's story. I have my own, but I'm so hesitant to drag some of them up. I'm hoping that telling someone else's will open me up to it a little bit more. My stepmom didn't like us much, but she told my sister, who was 3 years older, and I had the experience growing up to scare us out of being stupid. It was my family's stranger danger story. My stepmom, we're gonna call her Macy, grew up as a kind of privileged teen in the 70s, and her mom had moved their family over here from England when she was about 9. She went to a pretty nice high school, and there she made friends with a girl named Lily, who didn't exactly run with Macy's type of the crowd, who was popular, stereotypical, you know. They really hit it off, and Lily would take Macy out to do her own type of stuff, like hiking and fishing and sailing. Anyways, because of Lily's influence, the two of them would do stuff like that at a good amount. One Sunday, they decided to go hike in some hills about an hour away. Macy put on what I'm sure were her extremely expensive hiking shoes, and the two of them drove off to hiking trails. Lily parked in this big clearing with the makeshift parking spots, but there were no other cars there. This was important in hindsight. Started hiking up the hill, off the path because Lily fancied herself as something of a badass. The hike was nothing extraordinary. They reached the top of the hill and my stepmom was done. The polished and pampered side of her was coming out and she groaned until Lily begrudgingly said okay. They would rest and then start walking down again, this time slower. They'd been heading down the hill for maybe 10 minutes when Macy started complaining again. Lily conceded to walking down the side of the road instead of the rough hiking trail. So there they are, probably looking like a couple of tools geared up for hiking and then walking down a crappy road. And after not even 5 minutes, a truck pulled up next to them. It was a red and rusty truck, and generally looking like a clunker. So the girls looked in as the passenger side window slid down. He had a big beard, a baseball cap pulled down, and long brown hair. He greeted them and even smiled through his beard, asking if they needed a ride. Macy described him as charming and even cute. Lily still says the moment they greeted them, her hackles went up. Despite her better judgment, my stepmom convinced her to get inside the truck. It must only be a 10-minute drive down, tops. The girls opened up the passenger door to this rusty old thing, and the guy directed them behind the seat to get in the back. They settled in, and the truck started rumbling forwards. Lily always said that this was the point that hit her, and what a mistake they had just made. The back seat was clean enough, but there was a rope on the floor behind the driver's seat, 4 boxes of saran wrap half hanging out from under the passenger seat. It seemed creepy and weird, but Lily didn't want to freak my stepmom out, so she just kept her mouth shut. After 10 minutes or so, the woods didn't look any clearer. They hadn't seen another car the whole time either. Lily asked how long he thought it would be. He told them he was taking them down a different route, down the hill, and they had to stop to get something first. That was it. The girls were 16 and 17 at the time, and Lily didn't want to press the issue, but she was scared. She can remember his hair because he was sitting behind him. He looked like a woodsy guy, but his hair was super tangled and dirty. She noticed crusted mud on his collar and tried to find something identifiable about him. Just got scared the more she picked up on little details. He was youngish, strong looking, and had a 1 on both of them. So they didn't ask any more questions, and he didn't offer any information as they drove on. Several minutes after that, they reached a tiny shack or a log cabin looking place, right there in the middle of the trees. There's an old stump where someone had been chopping wood and a huge axe stuck into the log. Lily was definitely on red alert now. The guy turned off the truck and slipped out of it saying,
"I'll be right back. Don't get out,"
and then disappeared into the house. Lily tried to talk to my stepmom about how she was incredibly uncomfortable, but she mostly just dismissed it. Lily started begging, increasingly freaked out, and then finally put her foot down, demanding Macy exit the truck with her, so they got out and walked around the front of the vehicle. The house was about 50 yards in front of them. They wandered around looking at it, hesitantly. If this guy was really decent and just trying to give them a ride, it would be super rude to just run off, right? My stepmom had this strict upbringing when it came to manners and a public persona, and she saw it as an issue of that nature. So she actually started to head back towards the truck, opening the front door to climb back in behind the driver's seat. Lily was pissed off and followed her to yell some more. On the driver's side floor, half hidden underneath the seat, there's this big hatchet. It had dried red-brown stains covering the blade and stuck to the floor underneath it. Lily understandably lost her shit. Seeing it, my stepmom started getting hysterical. They decided that leaving was by far their best option at this point, and just booked it off the side of the property and into the trees. They bumbled around in the trees for a little while, until Lily was fairly confident that they were back on their way down the hill. My stepmom cried all the way down. Lily felt bad about it, but was also completely freaked out, especially that he would hear it and kept trying to calm her down. When they finally got back down to the bottom and saw the old wooden fence that surrounded the original parking area, they were relieved. But as they got closer, they saw it. The truck. It was parked on the other side of the gravelly makeshift lot, just sitting there, facing the other way innocently. They couldn't see if anyone was in it, and of course, Macy wanted to just run for the car. But Lily was super hesitant. She managed to calm my stepmom down, saying that she wanted to wait before running out into the open to see what was out there. Remember, this is the 70s. No cell phones. There's no ranger station or anyone else around. The parking lot was big and empty, open. Who knows what would have happened if they decided to just stroll across it. Thankfully, Lily convinced my stepmom to chill. The two of them hunkered down against a big tree, hidden by bushes and other trees, and just waited it out. They sat there for a couple of hours when dark started to fall. All the animals started coming out and making noises, and my stepmom started getting antsy about this and bothering Lily, who was tired and moments away from just giving in. She was just planning their dash to the car when they heard a clunk across the twilight-lit lot. They watched as one of the back doors of their car swung open. The bearded guy slid his way out of the back seat. He got out and shut the door and looked around at the surrounding woods for several moments and then walked back to his truck. The truck lumbered past their car and out of sight. Several minutes after watching him drive away, they sprinted to their car as fast as they could, jumped in, and peeled out before they had even shut the doors. If this guy is even still alive at this point, he's definitely really old, but still, let's just not ever meet. When I was 14, I was asked to babysit my 3 younger cousins, ages 8, 4 and 1 in an extremely rural mountainous part of Pennsylvania. My aunt and uncle had to go to a wedding over an hour away and wouldn't be back home until very late. Their house was situated on a steep mountainside. Their back deck had a 15-foot drop onto a rocky hill below, leading down into a river. Their closest neighbors were about a half a mile away. The closest main road was a mile away, and at night there were no lights to be seen anywhere around them. Basically, it was in the middle of nowhere, and you would have to know where you're going to get there. You don't just accidentally end up there. My aunt and uncle had left us with some pizza and their cell phone number next to their landline. This was in the early 2000s. I didn't have a cell phone, but even if I did, I wouldn't get reception there anyway. So after leaving the pizza and their number, they headed out. The baby was already asleep. The 4-year-old wasn't feeling very well and was quietly watching TV in the living room as he dozed off. And the 8-year-old was playing Guitar Hero with me up in the loft. The loft overlooked the living room to the left, where I could keep an eye on the 4-year-old. There was a huge window that overlooked the driveway to the right. The description of the driveway is an important detail to the story. The road that led to their house ran straight into their forked driveway. It was on a dead-end road. The house was as far as you could go. Go to the left driveway, and there is an open carport, and that's where my aunt and uncle, or anyone who ever visited, would park. The right driveway led down a very short but very steep hill to a large leveled out area, and ended against a garage door that opened up into the basement of the house. It was never used as a garage, but served as my uncle's man cave, and that's where he spent most of his time. Right beside the garage door, a normal door with a window, so you could see right in. But this driveway was exclusively used by the kids as a play area because it was the only flat part of the yard-like area on the property. And being on a mountainside, there isn't really much room to play safely. No cars ever drove down there, ever. There are too many toys and bikes in the way, and friends and family knew about this. It was 10 p.m., pitch black outside, no moon to illuminate the area either. My cousin and I were still playing Guitar Hero when headlights caught the corner of my eye, and not the headlights of my aunt's minivan. Huge truck headlights with those roof lights you see on Jeeps or other off-road trucks. Not only that, the truck was going down the right driveway, the kids' play area. Again, this was not my aunt and uncle. This was not anyone that they knew. Panic and dread filled my body. I was a small teenage girl alone in an isolated house on a mountain at night with 3 children in my care. In a terrified voice, I asked my cousin, "Who is that? Jake? Do you know whose truck that is?" Then he looked panicked. "No, I've never seen that truck before," he replied. I quickly ushered him downstairs, still unsure of what to do, but the 2 little ones were sleeping down there, and I wanted to make sure that they were safe. I checked on the baby, then grabbed the phone to call 911. Then I started to hear the metal garage door being shaken violently. No one ever opened up that garage door. More panic began to fill me. I hear them try the door beside it, the metal doorknob jiggling. No one was actually knocking. It's not like they were checking to see if my uncle was down there or something. Plus, the lights were out. It was dark down there, and they knew no one was down there. It was clear at this point. They were definitely breaking in. The door leading to the basement steps was right next to the phone, so I could hear all this clearly as it's going on. I quickly turned the little lock on the doorknob just in case they made it into the basement. My heart was practically jumping out of my chest, talking to the dispatcher as my 8-year-old cousin clings to my arm. The operator is calm and trying to calm me down, but I knew it would be at least 30 minutes until a police officer could get all the way up here, assuming that they didn't get lost on this mountainside in the pitch dark. Just kept thinking, we're f***ed. We're dead. This is how I die. The operator asked for the number my aunt and uncle left me so that she could have another dispatcher call them to let them know the situation. I turned around to grab the paper with the number on it, and to my absolute horror, see a man peering in the large sliding glass door. A huge, burly, what had to have been a 6'4" man with a long, scraggly red hair and a big red bushy beard. It made it worse. He was grinning at me. Grinning in a way that still scares me to this day. Meanwhile, I had to have looked like a terrified deer in headlights, shaking so hard that I could barely hold the phone. There was a second man behind him, but I couldn't see him as well. I have no idea what he looked like, but he was for sure just as equally tall, but more lanky than the larger man at the sliding glass door. I screamed, "Oh my God, they're here!" And just before the 911 operator could say anything, my 8-year-old cousin goes,
Mr. Jim?
His voice was very confused. It wasn't like my cousin was happy or even relieved to see him. I asked, "You know who that is?" But before my cousin could answer, I turned my attention to the man in the door. "I'm on the phone with the police," I shouted. I'm grateful he didn't try that door because I do not think it was locked. The man just stared at me for a moment, eyebrows furrowed, like deciding what he wanted to do next. But then he just backed away into the darkness. It seemed like an eternity later. I saw the truck lights back out of the driveway and then continue back down the road until they disappeared. I was still scared shitless, and so was my cousin. He had only met that guy a few times, an acquaintance of his dad. It wasn't like he was a close family friend or anything. And obviously, because again, he went down the wrong driveway. Visitors never go down that way. The 911 operator asked for a description of him, then told me they'd gotten in touch with my aunt and uncle and that they were on their way home. She stayed on the phone with me until a police officer showed up a little bit later, just to make sure the men were gone, and then they stayed with us until my aunt and uncle got home, so they could ask them a few questions. My uncle was furious, not at me for calling them home early, but at this Mr. Jim guy. He muttered something like, "I'll f him up." My aunt was mad at my uncle and told him to tell Jim to never come back here again. I didn't know at the time, but my uncle had a really bad drug problem. I don't know what Mr. Jim or his accomplice were doing, or what they would have done if I wasn't on the phone with the police. But that grin I saw, it was not a friendly one. It was sinister. And again, he also had to have known my uncle was not there because that basement was completely dark. He would have seen through the windowed basement door. He also tried lifting the garage door, something not even my uncle did. He intended to break into the basement. That much is very clear to me. There's no other explanation. I never did babysit for them again, and I don't think I ever went back up there because not long after that, my aunt divorced my uncle and moved out. So, Mr. Jim, the grinning burly mountain man who tried to break into the house where I was, let's not meet again. When I was in college, I took this job for this eccentric guy who was trying to manufacture these machines for some company. I would just show up and assemble the machines for around 4 hours a day. It was a quite and pretty easy job. It was just this guy, some of his family working for him, an accountant, and myself. The job was in this small town, which was now run down. Used to be an old gold mining town between the 1890s and 1910s. The building I was in was just part of the entire block of buildings that was all connected. The building itself was about 100 years old and was 3 stories. It had a basement which was sealed off with an entrance from an old warehouse next door. The middle story was completely empty, just a big room with some pillars. The top floor, where I was working, had high arched ceilings and a big beam that ran across the center of the room. The top floor was accessed by a rickety set of stairs with a room to the right and a big room to the left, and then a small room in the back. The room to the right was just some half-empty shelves with some engineering books. The small room in the back is where the accountant's desk was at. The main room, where I was just a long table with some shelves in the middle. I was short some hours because of finals, so I asked the boss if I could work late one night. He said it would be just fine. Just make sure I lock the front door when I leave. About 5 p.m., everybody had left. After they left, I checked the front door at the bottom of the stairs just to make sure that it was locked. I sat there and worked for about 2 hours without incident. Then I heard someone coming up the stairs. Those stairs were old and rickety. They creaked and groaned with the lightest step. I thought nothing of it. I assumed the boss forgot something, maybe a book or something, and was over in the other room just looking for it. I didn't hear anything and called out after a few minutes. Nobody answered though. To access the back room or anywhere else, a person coming up those stairs would have had to walk right by me. No one walked by me. I finally decided to get up and go into the other room to see who it was. Well, I walk around the corner and no one's there. I'm not scared or anything, just confused. The rooms are big and mostly empty, so it only took a minute to walk around the place and it was definitely empty. I stood at the top of the stairs perplexed for a few minutes and then decided that someone was just messing with me. I literally went over and started moving the bookshelves to see if there was something behind them. There was nothing. Not that there was any point, but I searched the building again. This time upstairs and the big empty room downstairs. I even checked the door, which was still locked. I felt a little bewildered, tried to come up with possibilities in my head. I finally came to the conclusion that someone in another part of the building must be doing some construction or something, causing those stairs to shake. It was a long shot, but what alternative was there? I went ahead and clocked out, went down the stairs and made sure the front door was locked. This was my first time working late, and the boss told me to ensure that that door was locked when I left. I even double checked it. My plan was to go next door and see if they were doing some sort of construction or something. I felt like I needed an excuse as to why I didn't get much done, because I was walking around trying to figure out who walked up those stairs. When I went outside, I realized the entire block was completely empty. This is an old industrial area. Not only was the block empty, but every block around it. I was still convinced that someone was in another building and they caused the stairs to shake. I got in my car and drove around the back side of the buildings to see if maybe they were working in the back. Nope. Another block that was completely void of anyone. To me, being in a desolate area like that was even creepier than whatever caused those stairs to shake. I circled around the entire block in less than a minute, decided that I would just go home. As I drive back by our building, my heart about explodes. The front door is now wide open. So it's about 7:30 p.m. Pitch black outside except for a street light at the very end of the block. There are no cars or people anywhere, as far as the eye can see. I stop the car and just sit there like an idiot, staring for about a minute. I finally calm down and decide to drive right up next to the door and see if I can see any lights in the building. Nope, again, it's pitch black inside. At this point, I'm debating how badly I want to keep this job. I worked at Kmart before this, and I certainly don't want to go back to working with customers again. This job paid a lot better as well. If I leave with that door wide open, I could get fired. If I go close the door, I'm gonna probably shit my pants out of fright. Being a poor college student, I found my balls and, with the car still running, got out, ran over to the door and slammed it shut. Then twisted the handle to see if it was locked. It was not. It seemed like minutes, but probably took a fraction of a second. I opened the door just enough to reach inside and turn the lock. I slammed the door again and twisted the handle again to make sure that it was locked. It was. But before I could take my hand off the handle, I heard those stairs shaking again. Even if I had looked, I wouldn't have seen anything because the stairs were pitch black. But needless to say, I didn't look. I turned pale white and ran the few steps back to my car and slammed the door. Threw it in gear and floored it. I was driving so fast I had to slam on the brakes for the stop sign at the intersection. I don't know what possessed me, but I looked over my shoulder, guess out of morbid curiosity. It was dark, but I could see the door. It was still shut, so I went home. I went back to work the next day and debated for a long time if I should say anything or not. I finally decided I had to say something and talk to the guy's son. I explained that something kind of weird happened to me here last night. He replied by asking me if I heard noises. I shook my head up and down. Then he told me that he thinks this place is haunted or something. He said he used to work nights and would see shadows and hear noises, but he wouldn't go into detail. He just said that he doesn't work alone or at night here anymore. He said I shouldn't work at night anymore either, and they would let his dad, my boss, know not to ask me. I never got any more information out of him about his experience, and I didn't feel comfortable explaining my entire experience to him either. I told him about the stairs rattling, but not about the open door. The strange thing was that the boss would work late by himself many times. He told his son he was stupid and to cut his bullshit. He didn't care much for me either after his son told him that I didn't want to work nights anymore. Between the strange occurrences and the boss treating me with less respect, I found a new job in a few weeks and left. Years later, I see my old boss in the newspaper. They had said his business went under and he was being evicted from the building. He refused to leave, and when the cops came to force him out, they found him dead. He had hung himself in the center of the room from the center beam in that building, in the same room I used to work in. The reason that it made the paper was because they thought it was a murder, because there was nothing below him that he could have stood onto to get his head into the noose. After a few weeks, they couldn't find any evidence for a murder or motive for it. So the only conclusion was that he climbed to a shelf near the wall and somehow, either hand over hand or walking on the beam, got to the center of the beam to hang himself. I never saw that family again. I'd heard that they moved to Florida to live with their other family. I was born and raised in North Dakota. Back when I was in high school, a group of us would research murders that occurred out in the county. We would then go out and find the scenes and film the exploration at night. It was something to do while we got wasted on shitty beer and just teenage bullshit. Eventually, we ran out of places to go and got really good at finding abandoned rural farmsteads by driving dirt roads and just looking for signs. Rut roads, deliberate tree groves, and old mailbox posts were common markers. We were out looking when we spotted a tree grove that was out of place and drove through the field and discovered an old, but not too old, house. It had padlocks on the outside doors that were knocked off pretty easily. We dispatched of them and entered the kitchen. There were 6 of us, all with flashlights, and we lit up the kitchen/dining area fairly easy. The table was the initial thing that you noticed, and it was strange because of how normal it actually looked. It was set for a meal. Not a bowl was out of place. The only thing was, we'd been in dozens of these houses, and place settings were a first, especially unbroken ones. As we investigated the area, we found the fridge had the disgusting remnants of a full stock, and the cupboards were full of canned and dry foods. This was definitely also a first. One guy found mail on the counter from early June 1978, and another found a creepy-ass TV guide in the living room with UFOs on the cover. All the family photos were still hanging up. Mom, dad, brother, sister, in their 1970s glory. The furniture was dusty, but in good condition. Closets were full. Everything was totally normal, which was abnormal. As we continued to dig around the house, we all started to realize that this house had not been moved out of. It had been straight up abandoned. Imagine locking the door to your house and just never coming back. That's the state this house was in. Complete, unplanned departure. We went upstairs and split into 3 pairs to check out the 3 rooms. Ours was the closest, and obviously it was the younger boy's room. I can't describe what it looked like too well because almost right away from the hall, we heard the most fucking terrifying scream that I've ever had the misfortune of hearing. We were running down the hallway, and we're all yelling questions at one another around the same time. After a few really long seconds, the 2 screamers caught their breath and said, You have to go in and see," walking down the hall and through the doorway. I prayed that I wouldn't act like a pussy in front of my friends. I shouldn't have been concerned, because the others were as scared as I was. The room itself opened up, and to the left of the doorframe, and centered on the right side of the room, was a queenish-sized bed, propped up on the pillows with the blanket drawn to the waist, arms on top of the blanket, and worst of all, the head was turned slightly, so it was looking you straight in the eyes when you entered the room. It was a life-size porcelain doll. Snow white skin, jet black hair, cold, dead eyes. The dead eyes lit up our flashlights, like she was waiting for us. If the head hadn't been turned, I could excuse it, but it was turned, ready for you when you walked in. Ready for 20 years. Hasty fucking exits were made down those stairs and back into our car. It was during the ride we started to get even more creeped out, because we realized that even though the house had been abandoned, someone had taken the time to set up that goddamn doll. Not packing food, clothes, or family photos. Setting up the doll was one of the last things done in this house. We researched their names, but got nothing. No tragic car accident, no grisly massacre, no extended family. Just a tacky time capsule in the middle of nowhere. We found out that the county had been taking possession of the land for non-payment of taxes. explaining the locks. Never tracked down any more information on what happened to them, or why they left that fucking doll. In early 2007, I was on a traveling singing group. There were 8 of us on a team, and the team members were switched every single year. We were invited to stay at the evening at the house of a previous member named Drew. Drew wasn't home, so it was his mom, his sister, and his brother who hosted us. Now, we'd all known Drew's dad died about 4 years earlier, but he died of a heart attack and not in the house. I generally try not to be superstitious, but I went into the house and immediately felt just a little uncomfortable. I think I blamed it on the fact that Drew and I never really seen eye to eye, or that I felt bad for his mom, who'd been widowed so young and left with 3 children. A sleeping space was very limited, got put down on a cot in the basement, along with the other girl in my team. The basement wasn't a creepy basement by any means. It had been refinished and was pretty comfortable. My cot was only about a foot from the wall, and there was a small old digital clock between the wall and the cot. I fell asleep in my usual manner, facing the wall, back to the room. At 2:48, and I'll never forget the clock since it was the only thing that I could focus on, I woke up very suddenly. I was immediately frozen in bed. My heart was racing, my throat went tight, and I couldn't swallow. This was primal fear at its best. I couldn't roll over to check, but I swear, even now, that something was standing over me. Everything in my instinct told me not to turn around. It felt like my life was depending on me staying right where I was. During this time of intense fear, I kept seeing images in my mind, flashes of gore and horrible things. I could also hear a laughing in my ears, but not the voice of just one person laughing. It sounded like I was in a room with thousands of voices laughing. I remember for the first time having suicide run across my mind during this overwhelming, fear-driven time. I should note here that I'm not, and I've never been suicidal. When that feeling went away, the last thing I remember hearing in my mind was, "Not this one." I looked at the clock again, and only 9 minutes had passed. The longest 9 minutes of my life. A few hours later when I got up, I decided I was going to get the hell out of there as quickly as I possibly could. I skipped the shower and breakfast and sat in the van waiting for the rest of my team. As I was waiting, Drew's brother came out and spoke with me. And in one sentence he said, "I'm sorry I couldn't help you this morning." As he said it, he had tears in his eyes. He honestly looked like he was going to be sick to me. The look of hopelessness in his eyes still haunts me to this day. 2 weeks later, we got word that Drew's brother had killed himself just before 3 a.m. Ever since the incident, I still occasionally will have dreams about that laughing. Part of me wonders if I would have just tried talking to his brother, maybe things would have been different. I never spoke about this to anyone but my husband. It brings back a chill to my spine just writing this down, and an overwhelming sense of guilt. I don't know what to make of it, or what the hell really happened inside that house, and part of me never wants to know either. This story is from a childhood friend who told me this, and it still unnerves me to this day. She was genuinely freaked out, and her family even backed up her claims, so here it goes. My friend and her family moved into this rental property, and my friend claimed that it was haunted. Everyone agreed that there was an off feeling, and those who visited or stayed over there would mention it as well. I myself experienced this odd feeling of foreboding whenever I went over there, and believed the consensus that the house was indeed haunted. It honestly felt oppressive inside there, and you would feel this pitiful dread that is hard to compute into words. It was extremely uncomfortable to experience, just to say the least. Anyway, this particular event, and that is the basis of this post, was enough for my friend's family to pack up and stay with relatives until they moved out permanently. On this fateful afternoon, my friend had arrived back home from the park and heard an argument taking place in the kitchen between her mom and dad. My friend thought this was odd, as both of her parents should be at work, so she called out, "Mom?" before unlocking the front door and going inside. My friend said the house felt instantly silent. An uncanny silence, like all the air had been sucked out of the place. It felt stifling. It felt wrong. Then her mom said, "Hey, we're just in here." My friend was just outside, closed the kitchen door at this point, and froze beyond opening. It was her mother's voice, but there was something off. Like the cadence was missing that made it actually her mother's. It sounded flat and unnatural. My friend decided to bolt back out the front door and wait until her brother came home. But she said as she turned back, she saw her mother peering at her from the lounge room window. But it wasn't her mother. The face was the same. Everything was the same. But her face was devoid of anything that actually made it her mother. There was no recognition on her mother's face. There was no indication that she was looking directly at her daughter. There's no emotion in the expression. Nothing. The eyes looked unstaring and utterly blank. My friend screamed and ran down the street to her mother's work and confirmed that she was there this entire time and had never been at home. Initially, my friend's mother reasoned that someone must have broke in, but at a later investigation, it proved nothing had been stolen. The back door was locked, as was the front door when my friend came home. No one could rationalize who my friend saw in the window and why it looked so much like her mother. So that was the deciding factor to nope the f*** out of there and find somewhere else to live. The landlord of the house denied anything like this had happened while they lived there, but did admit that tenants didn't stay long, saying there was something wrong in the house. My friend also told me that she was the only one who actually saw anything definitively sinister inside that house. But her family said they definitely felt an evil presence there, which ultimately manifested into the doppelganger experience that my friend had had. Utterly terrifying. A few years ago, when I was still a teenager, my friend Justin and I would often go longboarding at night, as my friends and I were quite the night owl. We loved the freedom of almost never seeing another soul on the road or the paths that we frequented. Even when using the main road, it would be very rare to see a car out so late in such a rural area. You could also hear them coming from very far away due to their headlights and the noise of the vehicle disrupting the peaceful silence of the night. We were really into it at the time and would often ride our boards for miles and miles, sometimes not even getting home till the sun was up. One particular night, we decided to ride for a few miles away from our usual back road to take one of our favorite hidden routes. It began with a narrow paved path that was the only piece of land separating two sides of a long lake. It would often sink under due to the rain, and we wanted to seize the opportunity to use it before it rained and went underwater again. It was roughly 2 miles long and was extremely relaxing to ride through due to the scenery. After making it to the end of the lake, we decided to continue moving and turn into a very close path that leads directly into a densely wooded wilderness preservation. As we came up to the first hill, we looked down at the bottom into the blackness. We both noticed what appeared to be a tiny moving ball of dim light. It moved very strangely and was extremely difficult to make out what it actually was. Rather than shine our flashlight down, we curiously watched it for a few moments, whispering to one another about what we thought it could possibly be. All at once, that small light turned into multiple blinding lights and extremely loud revving sounds, overwhelming our senses that had become accustomed to the darkened silence. Acting purely upon fear, we turned around and ran as fast as we could, hearing yelling and revving gaining behind us. By sheer luck, we managed to run off the path into a very dark, very overgrown hole in the side of a hill, overlooking where we had just come from. We immediately decided to hide in that natural dugout, hoping the plants and darkness would be enough to protect us from whatever was happening out there. We watched our pursuers ride up to where we had originally been standing. There were 4 men, 2 on 4-wheelers and 2 on full-size motorcycles. They were yelling at one another about something, but we couldn't quite make out what they were saying due to the distance that we'd covered. We felt safe enough to whisper very softly to each other and speculated on who these people could be. Our first original thought was maybe they were park rangers of some kind, although we'd never seen one here in many times that we'd been through. And honestly, we doubted that this country had the budget or even the desire to have anyone patrol the deep woods at night. Besides that, these men were on vehicles entirely appropriate for paved bike trails, and they were all very angry about something. They called out to us for quite a while, yelling things like,
"We know you're out there.
and
We can see you. Come on out."
we stayed silent and decided to call their bluff instead of running. Eventually, we clearly heard one of the men yell,
"Find them now."
and then smash a bottle. That had erased any hope we'd had that these were just park rangers. We watched them split up, each of them going a different way down the series of paths on their vehicles, including the path that we'd come from. It took us a while and what felt like ages to even move. We were frozen in terror inside that dugout, watching those lights from the vehicles traveling through the woods and paths, one of them already coming full circle and passing the point he'd started from. I thought about calling out for help, but I was too afraid to open my phone in fear that even the smallest amount of light would give away our location. After waiting for the lights of the vehicles to reach their further distance from us, we summoned up the nerve and tried to run somewhere far enough to get away to safely make a phone call. We ran hard and fast through those woods. Since their headlights gave away their location on these paths, we would hide again whenever we felt they were getting too close. Our available hiding spots were getting progressively worse as the woods became less dense, and the fear I felt waiting for one of them to drive past again, basically only being covered in leaves and plants, is still unmatched to this day. Finally, we emerged from the woods onto the intersection of the two main roads, far from where we'd started. We ducked down into the ditch to call for help. When I opened up my phone, I noticed that I had recent missed calls from one of our other friends, Connor, who was supposed to meet up with us after our longboard excursion. I called him and frantically asked where he was, and luck was with us again. He hadn't given up our plans despite us ignoring him. He was only a few miles away, heading in our direction. I gave him the names of the two streets that we were near and explained that we needed picked up right away. He agreed and sped over to us while Justin and I waited in hiding. Thankfully, Connor arrived before any of those men did, and we bolted into the back seats of his car, yelling for him to get the hell out of there, and he took off. Relief doesn't even begin to describe what I felt driving safely home after everything we just experienced. After explaining everything that happened to Connor, we ended up just moving on with our night and decided not to call the police. We figured that they would be gone by the time any officer had made it out there, and that we'd be only putting ourselves at risk by admitting to breaking the law by taking those paths so late at night. I still have no idea what happened, or even who those people were. I've been told all kinds of theories from friends and family. Some think that we walked right up into a huge drug deal. Justin and I later admitted to each other that when the revving started, we couldn't see. Our minds both went straight to some kind of chainsaw-wielding horror movie serial killer. So I suppose it couldn't have been much worse. Frustratingly enough, whatever those men thought that we saw made them want to catch us so badly we never actually saw. So I guess we'll never really know, I suppose. There's an abandoned house between my town and the next town on one of the country roads that connect us. I've been to it before, and even went inside twice with my sister and one of my best friends. It's an old house that dates back centuries, according to the bank records I was able to find. And you can just tell by the design itself. The house is 2 stories with a basement. It has a lot of furniture and objects strewn about inside, but it's far from empty. You can tell that it hasn't been lived in for decades, and whoever had it previously almost seemed like they just disappeared one day, leaving everything behind. The way I was able to get in before was through the cellar door in the basement, which is broken open and propped open with some big sticks. My first visit was around 2 years ago, and I hadn't gone back in all the time. Another friend expressed interest in seeing the house when I told him about my experience, and so last summer I told him that I'd take him with me. I never thought it was a dangerous trip. I just told him that it was an interesting place to explore. We parked across the street from the house, in the parking lot of one of the industrial buildings. The road was a rural one, but it was far from unused, and we didn't want to be questioned by anyone. My friend, being braver than me despite previous visits, led the way across the street and to the front of the house. He asked me a couple of questions about it, about the stuff I found in there. I told him that the kitchen still had expired food in it. The upstairs had a board game set that I ended up bringing home with me. As we walked from the front of the house to the side, leading to the back with the cellar, I made a note. There was a lot more brush than when we'd been last time. I had gone in the spring when I'd gone with my sister and best friend, and I never experienced the thick brush that I was now. I made a comment to my friend about it. We both tried to figure out a path to the cellar. Eventually we pushed through some branches and found the cellar, broken and propped open, just as I'd last seen it. We talked for a minute, being nervous, and I really took in the view of the cellar that led to the dark, abandoned house. I remember being really intimidated while looking at the opening. And I also made a mental note that some of the sticks propping open the cellar didn't look familiar to me. I didn't state it out loud, just figured it was my anxiety. My friend and I discussed who should go first, and he said since I'm the expert, I should head in first. I was hesitant, but eventually, after a good 5 minutes of breathing and calming myself down, I started down the few steps of the cellar. It was an awkward entrance, as half the cellar was collapsed and left little room for maneuvering. You had to duck under a part of the cellar door that was still put together, then inch your feet down the steps, then finally turn your body sideways to fit through the small gap into the basement itself. It took a long time after ducking under the door. Since my nerves came back for a second, I made it in just fine. My friend followed quickly behind, which I appreciated. We both just stood in the corner of the basement now, taking it all in. I turned my phone's flashlight on and he did as well. There was a spider web in the path to the stairs up to the first floor. I looked around and found some sort of tool to knock the spider web down. So I took the tool, swiped it through, and then after that, I tossed the tool onto the concrete floor. My friend and I talked quietly. I don't remember exactly about what, but afterwards, we fell silent for a second. Above us, I clearly heard a footstep on the boards above our heads. It almost seemed like they were heading towards the stairs that led down to the basement. I remember this part the best. As I looked at my friend, he didn't seem to react to the footsteps that I was hearing. I looked at him, suddenly very worried, and before I could even say anything, he said, "We need to go." He turned around and practically jumped up the stairs. And I remember thinking he got out insanely fast. I could see him turn and reach his hands to help me back up. I was a bit slower, but I also quickly stepped up the stairs as he pulled me through the opening. I landed on my hands and knees after I escaped the cellar, and I immediately stood up, facing the weeds. I turned around to my friend, who was crouched, staring down the cellar still. I said to him that we should get out of here, and he turned away quickly and told me to go first through the weeds. I pretty much just sprinted through the brush, definitely getting cut up by something, but we made it through them and back in front of the house very quickly. My friend kept urging me to go in front of him, and he watched behind us before switching to flashing his light in the windows on the first floor of the house. I asked him what he was doing and if he was okay. He didn't really answer me at first, so I asked if he heard those footsteps before we'd bolted out of the basement. He told me that he'd heard them, and that's why he was watching the cellar, to see if anyone was going to follow us out. He continued, saying that after he pulled me up, he turned to guide me away before he let go of my hand. And when he turned back, he saw the bare feet of someone standing at the bottom of that cellar. Because of the cellar's dilapidated structure, he could only see their feet and a part of their legs. At that point, that's when he told me to go through the weeds first. He never saw them come up the stairs or move away before he followed quickly behind me. At first I didn't believe him. I thought he was just trying to scare me, but I could tell by the serious tone of his voice and the silent look he gave me after telling me about it that he wasn't trying to make me laugh or lighten the mood. I still asked if he was lying, and he aggressively said that he wasn't. He told me that I heard the footsteps already, so I knew something had to be in that house. We stood for a second, not really saying anything, before we both agreed to go back across the street toward our cars. We stood by our cars for a while, watching the house to see if anything or anyone would come out. Nothing ever appeared. After him reassuring me that he was telling me the truth, it started to rain and we called it a night. I fully believe him. I mean, he's always stood by what he saw. And we still haven't gone back to that house since. I like to tell myself that whoever was in there was just a homeless person finding shelter. But I still get shivers to this day, thinking about how close that person was to me as I scrambled up those cellar stairs. This happened around a year ago. There were so many terrible factors working against me that night that I'm astounded that I got away unscathed, at least physically. It all began when I was at my friend's apartment, who lives in a really rough part of town. In a series of poor decisions, that night I decided to get belligerently drunk and take a few pills of God knows what. I know. Safe to say, after a solid night of partying, around 4 a.m., I was not in the right state of mind. My drug-addled brain decides that instead of staying the night at my friend's apartment, like I normally would, I wanted to Uber back to my own apartment. My friend's apartment had 2 separate entrances and exits to the building, one in the back and an unlit parking lot of the building, and one facing the street. They had 2 sets of keys for each door, and I only had the keys to the one in the back of the apartment. Since my Uber would obviously arrive at the street, the door in the front of the building locks itself behind you. I exited this way when the driver was soon to arrive. Looking back, standing outside that apartment, I realized I looked like the easiest target on the planet. I'm a small, petite female in my early 20s, and I can hardly stand upright. I'm using a street lamp to prop myself up, and not doing a great job at it either. The light was basically a beacon for any nearby predator saying, "Come get me." I'm not paying attention to my surroundings at all in this state, despite the fact that there was literally a bullet hole in the front door I just came out of. Not good. I remember checking to see what car I was getting picked up in, and was only able to pick out the fact that it was a black sedan. Soon after stepping outside, a black sedan pulled up to the curb and started rolling down the window, so I stepped forward. Before this man even spoke, I could feel something was wrong. He had an expression like he was tearing me apart with just his eyes. After seeing that look, it gave me new meaning to the word predator to describe a criminal, because then I knew what it felt like to be prey. He basically just barked at me. "I'm your Uber driver." This was the second red flag that somehow made its way to my brain. Normally, Uber drivers just roll down the window and say, "Fossil Fuel 12" or any version of that, but always including your name. I think I just stared at him for a second, my brain slowly putting together the pieces of the situation I was potentially in. So I asked him, "What's my name?" He immediately is enraged, starts screaming about how he doesn't have fucking time for this. Just get in the fucking car. I don't think I've ever sobered up so fast in my life. I'm completely panicking now. Obviously, this wasn't my Uber. Quickly checking the license plate, I immediately see it's not a match. Meanwhile, this guy is still screaming at me the whole time, and I have absolutely no idea what to do. If I bolt in either direction, this guy could easily outrun me, or maybe he has a weapon. I'm also pretty sure at this point that if he's trying to nab a random girl off the street, he has to have some kind of weapon. I couldn't run back into the apartment door behind me since it locked behind you, and I don't have the keys, nor the time to unlock it. Running towards the back door would do nothing as well, as he's idling right by the mouth of the driveway towards the back of the parking lot. And again, I would have to take the time to find the right keys just to get inside. If I screamed, I'm not exactly in the type of neighborhood where someone would try to be a vigilante, and I can still hear the music radiating from my friend's 3rd floor apartment. I knew they wouldn't hear me. It's 4 a.m. and there's absolutely no one else around. People talk a lot on this sub, how they either sprint into action or just freeze, but I felt incapable of doing either. It was the absolute worst feeling I've ever felt in my entire life. Everything inside of me wanted to just run, but I felt like if I did, that truly would be the end of me. But if I just keep standing there, staring in shock at the screaming man, the result would be the same. From when he started screaming at me to this point, I'm guessing 20 seconds has passed. Just as he's looking like he's getting ready to get out of the car, another black sedan pulled up right behind him. Checking the license plate as quickly as I can, I realize that it's my actual Uber and make a full-on sprint to the car and throw myself inside, screaming at the real Uber driver, "What's my name?" That poor man looked terrified, but responded quickly with my name, to which I reply, "Get me the fuck out of here. That man is trying to kidnap me." If I was in this Uber driver's position, I think I would be too shocked to react as quickly as he did. But my dude flew out of there, offered to call the cops for me, which I declined and now regret, and then walked me to the front door of my apartment, ensuring that I got inside safely. Truly an incredible human being. You can rest easy knowing that he got the fattest tip my college student bank account would allow for, although he deserved much, much more. So to the man who ruined my sense of security and caused countless anxiety attacks when out in public for months, let's never meet again. My story takes place in a very small town in the northeast region of the United States, in the summer before I went to college in 2015. After I graduated high school, my parents decided to move to a smaller, more affordable house about 45 minutes north into the mountains. We stayed in my childhood home because the public schools in my area were the best in the state, and my parents really valued my education. I ended up going off to an amazing university. Now I have an incredible career because of that excellent education. As most people in the US know, amazing public education usually means higher property taxes. My parents got to the point where they could not afford the taxes on their 4,000 square foot home anymore and decided to sell it just after I graduated high school. Their home is humble, and it sits on a beautiful piece of land on the side of a beautiful mountain. The trees are always so green, and there's a lot of wildlife around. They don't have many neighbors either, as their driveway is about 1.5 miles long. But this is what they chose to live on after I went to college. In August of 2015, we moved into this new house. I wasn't planning on staying long as I was getting ready to head off to college as a freshman for the first time. We decided to have a little housewarming party with a bunch of family friends and my best friend at the time as well. My dad was manning the barbecue and my mom was making drinks while we were playing with our dogs. It was a grand time and everyone had so much fun. My dad had built a brick fire pit in our backyard. Just to set the scene for you here, the fire pit was about 30 feet from our back patio door. We had a picnic table and other seats all around. Behind the seating was a tree line. It was so dark sometimes at night that you needed a flashlight to see 10 feet in front of you. With the fire pit lit, you couldn't see someone unless they were either sitting next to you or across from you next to that fire pit. My best friend decided to stay the night, and we asked my dad if we could make some s'mores, as it was getting a little chilly, as it does in the late summer in the Northeast at night. My parents left us outside with my dog, Nino. Nino was a huge 100-pound black lab pit bull mix. He was such a loyal and incredible dog that my dad truly loved and trained as his right hand. He was our protector, as he could run extremely fast and was very strong, and alerted us when something went bump into the night. Side note, he passed away a week before I got married in 2022. He was 17 years old and lived an adventurous life with my parents, hunting squirrels, laying out in the sun, and running amok. Nino lay in between us, facing that tree line, and my best friend was to my right. Our backs were to the dark, dense tree line. Our first mistake. We were laughing and joking and eating the s'mores together, planning our future, and generally excited about going off to college together. She decided to play some music, and we just sat back and relaxed, feeling content and at ease. It was the perfect summer night, and Nino started growling. I saw his ears perk up, his head cocked to the side. He sat up and continued to growl. My best friend and I looked at one another, thinking Nino just saw like a stray animal or something non-threatening. This area was known for lots of deer and rarely a coyote or wolf. As I mentioned before, he was trained to help my dad hunt, so we assumed it was some kind of buck or fawn in the distance. We didn't think much of it, and just went back to singing along to the music and talking about our fall class schedule. Again, Nino started growling. We did not call out for my dad, which was our second mistake. We didn't even think there was a problem until Nino started barking repeatedly, growing louder and more vicious. He then stood up, started barking as if to alert us that there was activity beyond that tree line that we could not see. So we stood up as well, the fire obscuring our view. My best friend took out her phone, paused the music, and turned on her flashlight. She began to walk towards the edge of the tree line with Nino just by her side. still growling and barking. We stood still, in silence, just listening. I was too afraid to even breathe at this point. She started walking a little bit deeper into the woods when she shined her flashlight and saw a figure, someone peering at us from within those woods behind a tree. A man with a green shirt and green pants on. We screamed and ran as fast as we could inside, leaving the fire unattended and that creepy man behind the tree. We did not know at the time where this man had come from. We crashed through our front door, breathless with Nino tailing behind us, and startled my mother, who was washing dishes and cleaning up after the party. She was talking to my dad about something, and they cut them off mid-sentence to explain that there was a man dressed in all green, lurking behind a tree in our woods. We didn't know how long he'd been there or if he was still there. We were both hysterical and crying. I remember feeling extremely sick, like I was gonna throw up. My dad jumped up, grabbed his shotgun and a headlamp, and ran outside with Nino. My mom quickly gathered us into the living room, shut off all the lights in the house, and locked the doors. She told us to be quiet, and she was gonna call 911. As she did that, my best friend and I just shook with fear. We anticipated hearing gunshots and screaming. We never heard any. My mom was now on the phone with a 911 dispatch, describing what we saw to the operator. And I heard my mom say, "Oh," in an alarming way. At this point, my dad came back inside, and my mom let him know that the police were on their way to us. Being in a small town on the mountain with less than 10,000 people means we don't get our own police force. We get the state police every time there's a call. My dad put his gun away and waited outside for the police to show up. To our bewilderment, they didn't send just one police officer, but 10, and an entire SWAT team and helicopter to circle the area. We were rightfully terrified, and I was practically having a panic attack at this point. The police officers came inside of our home and asked myself and my best friend what the man was wearing and what he looked like, asking us if we were able to discern any scars or tattoos. We told them the weird matching green outfit and about him wearing glasses. The officer excused himself and alerted the police and SWAT members outside of our description. And not long after, started to search the woods behind our home with their guns drawn, flashlights out, with the helicopter circling from above. They advised us to stay inside, and they would let us know if and when they found something. After about 25 minutes, we got a knock on our door. It was not one, but two officers. My dad let them in and they began to explain the situation at hand. One of the officers explained that we had to have seen on the news that a convicted felon from the prison about 20 miles away had escaped into the mountains. The police had set up a perimeter about 10 miles around the prison, but the convict had escaped them yet again. The outfit the man was wearing, as well as our description, signaled to them that the escaped convict was 100% lurking around in our remote, densely wooded backyard that night. The all-green outfit was a standard issue for prisoners in my state. They did not, however, find the man near us after 25 minutes of searching, so we had to be still out there. The officers then let us know that they were going to have a squad car stay and watch our house for a few days, as they were unable to locate the fugitive and believe he's still an active threat to our safety. So for that night, and for 3 nights after that, we all slept in the living room together. My dad's shotgun was within arm's reach at all times. Later that week, we got another knock at our door from the officers stationed outside of our house. They let us know that the man was back in police custody and that we were safe. They also recommended and advised us to get some security cameras and apologized that all this happened to us. My parents spent a lot of money on some security cameras and fenced in our backyard. We now have 4 cameras to watch the tree line at all times. I guess you never know what will happen or what goes bump in the night. I was a home health nurse for many years, and this time I had to go see a new patient. When we had to go see a new patient, we had a ridiculous amount of information to get. Thankfully, the company gave us new laptops, so it wasn't so bad. This particular patient needed wounded care on his foot and IV therapy. When I finally found his house, I pulled into his driveway and sat there for a few minutes. I immediately had that feeling like someone was watching me, so I sat there for a couple of minutes thinking, don't really want to go into this house. I gathered my stuff and walked up to the door. My patient answered and let me inside. It was a ranch-style home with an open concept kitchen, living room, and dining room. My patient was barefoot, except for the wound dressing. He went into the kitchen to wash his hands as I set up my computer and a few other things at the dining table. I sat with my back to the living room. As I was starting up my laptop, I heard someone in heavy shoes walk down the hallway from one of the bedrooms and then stop behind me. A feeling overwhelmed me, like that whatever that was still standing behind me. I turned around to introduce myself, but no one was there. I turned around the other way, and still I saw no one. I looked around to see if there was a doorway that maybe I hadn't seen. I started to feel like, what the is this? I know someone was there. I could feel it. My patient was watching me and chuckling to himself. He then said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Oh, nothing. I thought I heard someone walk up behind me." He still had a grin on his face and asked me, "Are you, sensitive?" I said, "Well, kind of. Why?" He said, "Do ghosts bother you? If they do, you don't have to do this." I politely said, "No, I'm okay. Why?" All the while my patient is still grinning and told me, "We have a ghost, but you don't have to be scared. He's friendly, but he does like to screw with people. He also was into computers, so he might be wanting to see what you're doing. He's kind of protective, but I think he'll be okay with you. He's a friend of mine. I rented this place off of him and his wife, and he was very into construction, and he was always over here helping me fix things. We had a problem with the roof, and he was up there 2 years ago fixing it. He had been up and down ladders all of his life. We don't know what happened, but he lost his balance getting off the roof onto the ladder and fell headfirst onto the driveway. We called 911 and did what we could. They life-flighted him. They said he was gone by the time they landed. They kept him on life support till the family came into town. I don't think he knows he's dead because he never left. He's still here. We hear him walking around on the roof, in the basement, and around the house. Things move. Tools go missing. He always had his heavy work boots on, and you can hear him walking real easy. He always said that he wanted to die in these boots, and he did." While he was talking, I had the strongest feeling of someone just right in my face, looking over my shoulder at my computer. I told him this, and he said that it was probably just him wanting to check out the laptop, see what I was doing. I just shrugged my shoulders and said, "Okay, well, let's do this." I was kind of intrigued, so I figured that I would probably just treat him like any other family member. I could feel him next to me so strongly. I turned to where I could feel him, introduced myself, explained my laptop, and what I was going to do. As soon as I turned my attention to my patient, it felt like someone kicked my chair on the leg so hard it shifted me a few inches. My patient just laughed and said, "Told you he screws with people." This continued throughout the whole visit. I never really felt threatened, but it's not something I want to do again. And it goes without saying that this was the last time that I saw that patient. This incident happened about 5 years ago. This is a story that I never really tell anymore, because most people are either uncomfortable hearing it or make well-meaning comments about what I should have done in this situation, without really understanding how differently your mind works when you're experiencing absolute panic. So here's my story. I was living in a relatively nice apartment in downtown Memphis, working as an ophthalmic technician. I arrived home from work at my usual time, which was around 4:30 p.m., unlocked my door, and went inside. I set my phone, wallet, and keys on the kitchen island, hearing my heavy metal front door swing shut loudly behind me, and began taking care of some errands around the house. Having grown up in a small town, it was habitual for me to not lock my door during the day, especially when I knew my husband would be home soon anyway. I've never forgotten to lock my door once in 5 years since this day. I walked through my bathroom and into my large walk-in closet and began hanging up the laundry that I'd started earlier in the day before I left for work. My front door opened. I smiled with surprise. My husband was home a little early, and I happily called out to him, "I'm in here, love." I was met with silence. and slowly began to feel that sinking feeling of something is wrong crawl up my spine. I tried to shake it off, thinking my husband simply hadn't heard me, and walked out of my living room kitchen area. Standing on the other side of my kitchen island was a complete stranger. He was male, older than me, I would estimate in his 50s, just standing there staring at me. No ski mask, no weapon, just watching me. I wondered if he'd maybe walked into the wrong apartment and was going to apologize and leave. But as he continued to stare, I realized that I needed to do something other than just gape at the stranger inside my house. I stood tall, puffed out my chest in an attempt to look more threatening, which is hard to do as a small female, but used a loud, clear voice, telling him to get out of my apartment, that he had no business being here. He completely ignored me, like I hadn't even spoken. Then began to pick up my things, my cell phone, my keys, my wallet. He picked them up methodically and put them into his own pockets. And that's when it hit me that this person is truly dangerous. I was naive enough to believe this was all a mistake until that moment. I darted forward toward the only other device that I had that would allow me to get help, my computer. I had to take a few steps closer to the intruder in order to reach it, but I still had 12 to 15 feet between us, so I knew I could grab it and run before he could reach me. As I picked it up and turned to run, I saw him start to move after me. I sprinted back toward the bathroom because it was the only place I could go and put two locked doors between us, my bathroom door and the closet door. I slammed and locked the first door, and within seconds, I could hear him messing with it, trying to open it. I ran into the closet and locked that door too, opening my computer and getting on Facebook Messenger to contact my husband. I sent message after message, pleading with him to call 911 and tell them that there was an intruder in our apartment. Got the messages within minutes and assured me that he had a dispatcher on the phone and he was leaving work himself to try and get to me if he could. I waited and waited. The bathroom door opened and the intruder came inside. He moved to the closet door and started to break down that door too. Here's the part where people usually start giving me advice on how I should have acted, but all I can tell you is that I was frozen in the moments. With fear and shock, I don't know, but I didn't scream or cry or search for a weapon in that dark closet. I didn't brace the door or try to hold it closed. I just kneeled in my closet and waited to die, because that's what I thought was going to happen. People also like to tell me that I lived in an apartment. Surely if I'd screamed, someone would have heard and come help. Surely there was something heavy enough in my closet to use to defend myself. Hell, even the laptop I had would hurt someone if I swung it at him. Why didn't I do anything? I don't really have an answer for that, but the closet door miraculously held. I heard frustrated footsteps go back into the living area of my apartment. I heard things breaking, bottles shattering, my drawers and refrigerator cabinets being flung open, and things were torn out of them. I continued to sit in that closet, silently crying and waiting to leave, feeling that death was inevitable. I feel awful about my selfishness in the moment, and I messaged my mom, who lived a 15-hour drive away, and told her what was happening as well. I desperately wanted comfort, and to tell her how much I loved her. I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine the fear and helplessness I put her in, knowing that her daughter was in danger and there was nothing she could do to help. She messaged me back constantly, begging me to keep replying. I told her I would as long as I could, but I also told her to tell my brothers that I loved them, and to help my husband through whatever happened next if it ended badly for me. The intruder came back and started messing with the closet door again, mumbling disjointed words that I couldn't really distinguish. I remember hoping that the police would get to the apartment before my husband, that he wouldn't be the one to find me in whatever state this invader left me in. The front door opened once more, but this time it was my husband shouting for me. The intruder walked out toward the living room kitchen area again, and I opened up the door and darted from the closet to find my husband on the ground with him, pinning him in place. The man kept mumbling and at times yelling, but never really put up much resistance. This entire part is a blur for me. I remember feeling like the room was spinning, filling with fear mostly for my husband at this point. Eventually the police found the apartment, It took them about 25 minutes to arrive, which still blows my mind. I know that time seems to move slowly during scary situations, so I thought it was less than that. But from the time my husband dialed 911 to the time the officers arrived, it was 25 excruciating minutes. This isn't intended to bash them in any way. It just seemed like an unusually long time for a response to a home invasion. They got my things back from the man and took him out of my apartment. I numbly went through the process of filing a police report and telling them what happened. One of the officers commented that I really should keep my doors locked at all times. I remember feeling like he was being very insensitive or blaming me for what happened. But later, recognized his words were coming from experience. I'm sure he's seen this situation end differently for other women. Within 30 minutes, the scariest incident in my life was over, but I've carried the fear, the violation, and the anxiety of having someone intrude into my space for years. If it happened to me once, it could happen to me again. If this or something similar has happened to you and you're struggling with the aftermath of it, the sleepless nights, the lying awake listening for sounds of forced entry, the nightmares, the constant check and rechecking your locks, this is what eventually helped me. A year after this took place, my husband and I moved to the Midwest for his job. We selected a safe town with a nice apartment complex and chose the third floor apartment with only one point of entry. I looked up every statistic on crime for that neighborhood, finding only one incident that isolated for a car theft, and it was the only thing reported in decades. I still couldn't sleep at night. It was definitely better than staying in that same apartment in Memphis, but my husband often worked night shift now, and I couldn't simply continue being terrified to sleep at night. I realized my biggest fear wasn't that something could happen again, but that if it did, I was just as unprepared now as I was then. I hadn't changed anything, other than locking my doors, and I knew I would likely freeze up again and leave my life up to being able to hide well enough or having a door hold long enough to save me, and that was unacceptable. I walked into a martial arts school with an excellent self-defense program, introduced myself, and started taking classes. At first, I was quiet, hiding in the back of the room and generally keeping to myself. My instructor, who was both incredibly kind and incredibly insightful, slowly built up my confidence and brought me out of my bubble of fear. After several months of training, I finally shared my reason for taking classes with him, and he's worked with me tirelessly to give me the ability to protect myself in any environment. I've been training for years now, and the difference has made in every aspect of my life is unbelievable. The meek, quiet girl that waited to die in her closet does not exist. I'm confident, I'm strong, I'm worthy of living and protecting myself in my home. I'm no longer ashamed of how I handled the situation I was in, but I also understand what steps I can take to ensure that I'm safe. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was worth it. I recognize this might not be a solution or option for everyone. Your experience is valid, and however you decide to cope with your own story is the right choice for you. This is how I happen to do it, and it's worked well for me. Thank you again for listening. I'm a little afraid to share this because I'm not sure how people will respond. Maybe doing so will help someone else that's feeling alone with this. If anyone is struggling with their own story and wants a kind ear to listen, I'm here. Stay safe out there. This night occurred about 7 years ago on my way home from my parents. I was 22, young and naive and just dumb. I moved into my first apartment, the first of my family to move away from our sleepy old train town that I grew up in. So I went home every Sunday to visit with the family, but mostly to do laundry and eat Sunday dinner. I live about 45 to 60 minutes up the highway, so I generally headed home by 6. On this night in particular, there was a summer's thunderstorm that had been pouring down rain relentlessly all day long. My cousins dropped in just as I was packing up to leave after dinner, so I ended up sticking around for a few more hours just to visit. I left my mom's around 10 p.m. in the pouring rain, and this was the first time after moving from home that I encountered something that truly scared me. I don't know why I never told anybody about this. I think it had to do with my pride. Everyone always gives me trouble about living alone as a single female in a newish area anyway. So here it goes. I left my parents around 10 p.m. in the pouring rain. Side note, I hate driving in the rain. So I'm driving down the service road that leads out of town and eventually turns into the on-ramp to the highway. As you're leaving town, the service road turned into a one-lane right in front of this quarry train loading station thing. I'm not really clear on what that place is, but it always gave me the creeps. If you're unfortunate enough to pass through there when a train is crossing the road, you'll be stuck there for a while. Once the road passes the tracks, it turns back into 2 lanes and goes up a steep hill. As I'm approaching the quarry, I can make out an orange light on a red cab 18-wheeler sitting in the quarry parking lot. Mind you, it's pouring rain. Visibility is low, so I can't make out the trucker until I'm pretty close to him. As soon as I can make out that it was a trucker, it pulls onto the road. I had to slam on my brakes to avoid hitting the trailer on the back of the truck. I skid around the road until I regained control of my car. So now, I'm stuck behind this dummy that just pulled out without paying any attention. I keep my distance behind him because I'm a little flustered. For the record, my headlights were on, so if he'd been paying attention, he should have been able to see me. Honestly, with the heavy rain and low visibility, who knows? So I'm behind this guy as we cross the tracks and begin to climb up that steep hill. Despite it turning into 2 lanes on the hill, he's driving right up the middle of the 2 lanes. I figured he didn't realize he was in 2 lanes, so I just putter along behind him, keeping my distance. As soon as he finally reached the peak of the hill and the road began to level out, he moves over to the right lane. Yes, finally. So I move over and begin to pass him. As soon as I get past the front of the truck, he swerves behind me quite abruptly and begins flashing his high beams at me. Usually, when someone flashes their lights behind you, or in our area anyway, it means to turn your lights on. But mine were already on. I checked as soon as he started flashing me again. Weirded out, I put my blinker on and safely changed lanes to get out of his way. He follows my lane change and begins laying on his horn. He honked 3 or 4 times at me, and it startled me, and I began to get a lot more flustered. The hell did this guy want? I moved out of his way. My headlights are on. So why didn't I just speed up and zip away, you might be asking? Well, I grew up in this area, and it had been raining heavily all day, and I know that service road floods a little, especially in the heavy rain, both on the shoulders and in the random spots in the middle of the road. It's a small Midwestern town. Our roads are shitty. I had already skidded and nearly wrecked once. I wasn't about to floor it on this bumpy service road that floods and risk wrecking again. There's nothing between that quarry and the highway, only about 4 or 5 miles of wooded area. If I wrecked, it would have just been him and me. So this went on for the next 4 to 5 miles to the highway. He began tailgating me in addition to the high beams and honking. Once the tailgating began, I was in tears. I still don't know what this guy wants from me. I'm trying to stay out of his way and get home safely. That's all I wanted. I changed lanes 2 more times, making it 3 total now. He continued to follow me from lane to lane. As we approached the highway, I floored it. He couldn't accelerate quickly enough to keep up, and I lost him, thankfully. As soon as I realized I'd lost him, and I'm safe on the highway, I just lose it. I was a hysterical wreck. There's only one exit after getting on the highway to stop in the small town that runs through it. After that, it's all woods for a good 30 minutes. Just thought about getting off of that exit just to calm down and pull it together. But I wanted to go home, so I sped right past it. I should have stopped. Once the city was no longer visible in my rearview mirror, it was much more calm. I managed to scramble my cell phone out of my purse and put it in my lap just in case. The rain led up to a drizzle the further I went, but I was still pretty on edge. There weren't many other cars on the highway, and the majority of them were just truckers. I'm cruising along in the center lane when the truck next to me in the passing lane begins blaring the horn and moving into my lane, forcing me over into the 3rd lane. He continued moving over, nearly forcing me off the highway. I sped up and changed lanes right in front of him so that I'm back in the center lane. Slow down so I'm in the line with the front cab. I double-click the home button on my phone and roll down my window. I start taking pictures of the cabbie. I think the flashes made him realize what I was doing, and he began slowing down until he was behind me again. Got a lot of pictures. I sped up and lost sight of him. I was satisfied that I managed to get a few pictures, but I was just so angry at this point. I pull over onto the shoulder of the highway and just wait for him. I wanted to get behind him so I could get a picture of the license plate and report this asshole. Sadly, he was on to me, for sure. I noticed headlights behind me. It was a long way back, but behind me nonetheless, on the shoulder of the highway. I waited, keeping an eye on the trucks passing me just to be sure I didn't miss him. As I looked back again, I noticed a shadow pass through the headlights of the truck, which spooked me quite a bit. Did he get out of the cab? I didn't end up sticking around to find out. I got back in my car and just took off and got home as quickly as I possibly could. The pictures were a total failure. It was still drizzling. The flash combined with the drizzle just resulted in washing out of the pictures. I could see the red cab, but no matter what filters I used, there was no making out exactly what the cab said. Red cab trucker, you're the reason I have a dash cam in my car. Let's not meet again. This is one of the most unsettling experiences I've ever had, and I had to share it with you. So I got a babysitting gig over the summer for one of my professor's sister's kid. I go over there to babysit one night, and this is a pretty big house, like a decent size. Not like mansion level huge, but pretty big nonetheless, with 2 stories and this fancy pool. They were pretty well off people, I guess you could say. So anyways, the mom leaves the kid with me. He's 9. We hang out for a while, maybe an hour and a half or so. He shows me his fancy toys in the living room, and he's like, wait, I have to show you the trains. So I follow him. He brings me downstairs to their basement, where there's this huge train set down there. It's at least the size of 2 dining room tables, with a train station, multiple tracks, a river, trees, mountains, and even this little town. It was actually pretty cool. So I'm like, whoa, dude. Watching him mess around with it and stuff. Then the train station starts making this loud beeping sound. The kid rushes to shut it off and goes, "Gotta be quiet, because my dad is sleeping." I'm like, oh, okay. He explains that his dad works at nights and sleeps during the day. So I'm like, I guess that explains why he needs a babysitter. Anyway, a few more hours go by. Most of it spent in front of the TV Roku thing. And eventually his mom comes home. She pays me and asks how it went. Jokingly, I tell her that he could get a little rowdy, but he was okay. Everything went well. She tells me she hopes it wasn't too much trouble. Then I reply somewhat joking that it's no big deal. And since we had to be quiet anyway, since there was no rowdiness or something like that. She kind of blank stares at me for a moment, then asked, "What do you mean?" So I explained, "Oh, you know, with your husband asleep and all, we didn't want to be too loud." She just blank stares at me still. I start to feel a little awkward, wondering what I said wrong until she replies, "My husband, I'm not married." I just pause and look at the kid who's sitting on the other side of the room messing around again with his toys. I shake it off because I'm tired and just want to take my money and leave, so I laugh awkwardly. "Oh, okay, I think maybe I just misunderstood something he said." She laughs too. "Well, it would be nice to have another set of hands around here, but for now, it's just me." In my head, I'm like, what? Just me? Hello, I don't know, I'm freaking out a little bit. And obviously I don't want to freak her out, so I just laugh awkwardly again and like, haha, yeah, I get that. And I leave not long after that. So yeah, we part ways and I speed away. Been thinking about it ever since. Is that not the creepiest shit ever? I'm hoping it was just some sort of miscommunication, but whatever happened, it freaked me the fuck out. And I'm not sure if I want to babysit there anymore. I'm back with another Utah Basin middle of nowhere story. When I was around 15 years old, me and my friends were driving around, going to all of the quote-unquote haunted places around the basin. It was getting close to Halloween, so as is tradition, we were all trying to scare one another. First, we went to a place called the Haunted Woods. This is an actual business. not a place in the woods. Then, we went to an abandoned hotel near the Ute Reservation. Nothing of significance happened there. We didn't see or hear anything. We were just goofing around having fun. Then, our driver said we're going to Skinwalker Ranch. I had never heard of Skinwalker Ranch, but I'd heard plenty of stories about skinwalkers. I was intrigued at first, but as we dropped down the hill back behind the property, a feeling of total dread settled on me like a heavy blanket. Everyone inside the car got more and more quiet, like they were feeling the heaviness too. "I don't think we should go here," I spoke softly.
"Oh, we're going,"
the driver announced.
"There's no moon tonight, and no flashlights allowed,"
He continued. "I'll just stay in the truck then. I have a really bad feeling and I don't want to go," I spoke again.
"You aren't staying in my truck alone. Now get out,"
he said rudely. I got out of the truck and looked over at my best friend. Her face was white and her eyes were wide and round. I knew she felt the same way that I did. We shouldn't be here. The driver of the truck said that this was the back end of the huge ranch. I wouldn't have believed him that this was really Skinwalker Ranch if I didn't feel that it was in every nerve ending in my body. He walked over to an ancient post and pole fence, undid the loop wire, holding up a small gate, and laid it on the ground. There was an overgrown 2-track road leading up into the darkness where we followed as he led us up. This horrible feeling of dread was almost overwhelming. Felt like I was going to be sick. I wanted to go running back to the truck, but I had a deep fear that something was going to pounce the moment I left the safety of the group. We weren't laughing and joking here. That heaviness was weighing on all of us, and we all walked silently through the dark. As we walked, I tried to keep my eyes on my feet, but I would occasionally glance to either side of the 2-track road. Each time I did, I would see a huge black mass out in the tall grass. I told myself it was just a cow, but each time I looked, it was the same spot off to the left, following our journey to the old homestead. Finally, the driver and the leader of our foolish expedition stopped and said that we were almost to the old homestead. He also said we needed to stay quiet in case the owners were around. As he turned to start walking again, a growl leapt from the darkness and he stopped and took a step back. He was no longer the fearless leader. His voice shook as he told us it was time to head back to the truck. We walked a little ways back, and then one of our group said they needed to use the bathroom, so we stopped by a small stream running along the south end of the property. I was smoking and talking to one of my friends, telling them how relieved I was that we were leaving. I glanced down at the stream, and at the same time my friend did, we both saw a black figure emerging from the water. It was not a cow. It was not a coyote. It looked like a too skinny and too tall man. We both screamed and ran back to the road. This was the last straw for everyone, and we all ran back the entire way to the truck. Now I know that's eerie, and also kind of uneventful, but have no fear, my story isn't over yet. A few months later, this adventure had slowly left my mind, and I'd started to convince myself that the figure in the darkness was just a cow, or probably it was just the dark running water playing tricks on my eyes, making me see things emerging from the water that weren't really there. My best friend had come over to my house to sit outside, bullshit, and smoke cigarettes. We did this pretty frequently. Like I said in my last story, we lived in the middle of nowhere, so dumb things like this were about as much fun as we could have. So we're just sitting there in her car, across the road from my house. Her car is pointed toward the town park, which was about a block away from my house. There was no other houses on the way to the park, so with the street lamps on at the park, you can basically see everything up there.
"Oh, look, a deer,"
my friend said suddenly. I could see a set of glowing eyes on the very end of the park. "Oh, yep, there it is," I reply. We watch it as it slowly walks towards the center of the park. In this spot is a huge metal slide/jungle gym thing that's probably about 10 to 12 feet tall. As the deer is walking, I notice that for some reason, I can't quite make out any features of the deer. It always seems to be just out of reach of the street lamps that are dotted throughout that park. That deer is right next to the slide when suddenly it stands up. The eyes that we're watching are suddenly even with the platform on the slide, which would make this deer 10 to 12 feet tall. Then it starts to walk, standing on its hind legs. Me and my friend both start panicking. What the f is that? That's not a deer. We keep watching this extremely tall creature cross the park when my friend decided that we're driving up there. She locked the doors and we head towards the park. When we were almost there, the eyes had crossed the street and went into the neighborhood across from the park. And by the time we finally got there, whatever it was had now vanished. After a few months went by, the event had definitely rattled us. There was no convincing ourselves that it was a deer. Deer do not walk on their hind legs, and they are not 10 feet tall. One night, I'm at that same friend's house, and that friend lives smack dab in the middle of a huge farmland. All around her were pastures. It was very peaceful most of the time. We had spent that night watching movies and just hanging out. I went out and started my car, and we were smoking together on her porch before I was about to leave. We were just chatting, and suddenly, her eyes leave my face and look behind me, and her eyes grew wide. I turn around to see two glowing red eyes just past the fence into her neighbor's pasture. What the f is that? I managed to squeak out.
I don't know.
She whispers back. The eyes remained fixed on us for about 30 seconds, then turned to the left, blinked, and vanished. We both immediately ran back into the house, and I didn't dare go home for another 45 minutes. If my car hadn't already been started, I probably wouldn't have left at all. A couple of years after these events, I was speaking with the Ute tribal member that I worked with, and she said something that gives me goosebumps to this day. She told me,
It isn't what's on the ranch that you should be afraid of. It's what follows you when you leave.
I'm convinced that something followed us back from Skinwalker Ranch, and those terrifying events was something warning us to never go back. I never did, and I never will. My apartment was robbed once and then broken into a couple of months later. And that's not even the crazy or spooky part. I had just moved in and I got very, very sick. And I actually had to go stay with my parents while getting treatment at the hospital. No one had even been to my new place or knew the address. It was full of unpacked boxes that I was too ill to move in properly. Whoever broke in, they left the TV. They left the jar of cash on the dresser, and they only took my diaries. Multiple diaries, and I always buy the same kind, and they date back for years and years. Each of them were packed into different boxes too. Someone had rifled through my stuff, found those diaries, and only took them. They even left my DIY and recipe books, which were the same style as those diaries, so they had to have checked each individual one. This apartment was on the 3rd floor. There was no sign of a break-in, but there was small handles on the outside of the pillars of the porch that went all the way to the ground. Thinking perhaps they climbed, but I don't know. The second occurrence, when I knew something weird was happening and that someone had been in my apartment, I returned home one night to find the light outside of my door was off. In the moment, I didn't really think much of it, except that I need to call and get it replaced. I unlocked and opened up my door and tried to turn on the light. Nothing. I thought maybe the power had gone out, but then I looked and saw my microwave still had the correct time on it. Something about that spooked me, and I went over and called the on-call agent for our apartment complex. He came over and I waited outside. He came out a few minutes later and told me to immediately call the police. Turns out, nothing had been taken, but every single light bulb in my apartment had been unscrewed just enough so that the lights wouldn't turn on. The cops came and checked it out, found nothing suspicious, but told me to stay somewhere else for the night. The next day, after telling my sister what happened, her and her boyfriend drove from 3 hours away and installed deadbolts. It was against the complex's policy, but the management was just as creeped out as I was. Thankfully, nothing else creepy happened in the 2 years that I lived there. My family and I used to live in a very rough neighborhood when I was a kid, around 7 years old. One night, it was just my mom, me, and my 2 siblings at home. My dad was on a business trip. Around midnight that night, someone began to knock on our door. My mom woke up, went to the front door and asked who it was. No answer. She thought maybe it was some kids playing ding dong ditch or something, so she just casually didn't think much of it and went back to bed. About 30 minutes later, someone began to knock again. This time, she got up and peered through the side window to see if she could catch anyone out there, but there was nobody there. She starts to worry, goes back to the room, grabs my dad's shotgun, and sits in the living room in the dark, just waiting. Sure enough, a few moments later, someone began knocking again. This time, my mom shouts at whoever it is that she's going to call the cops, and if anyone tries to come inside, she would shoot them. Again, no response. My mom phoned the police, and around 2 a.m., they finally show up and do a quick search of the outside of our house while we all waited on the inside. After their search, they tell my mom that they'd found a piece of barbed wire about 4 feet long next to the front door, and they asked if it belonged to us. My mom told them that it wasn't hers and asked why. The police officer told her that it had to belong to whoever was knocking on the door then. He also told her he thinks that they were planning on strangling my mom with that barbed wire when she opened up the door to see who was knocking. Told her she was very smart to not open the door to see who's out there, otherwise it could have costed her life. They said they'd patrol the neighborhood until morning and do a thorough investigation once there was daylight outside. That next morning, as they were searching around the house, found footprints leading to the back of the house and leading up to my bedroom window. They'd also found nicks in the window seal, where they were trying to pry it open and break in, but had failed. Not long after that, we moved out of that house. I've been in law enforcement for nearly 6 years, and I've had a few supernatural things occur during my shifts. The most recent one came from a 911 hang-up call. I was riding 2-man on a summer night, and it was probably around 2 or 3 a.m. when we got a call for a 911 hang-up. The only call comments were that it was a call placed to 911, and upon answering it, the person hung up. When dispatch attempted to call back, no one would answer. The area in which I was working this night, I have basically spent my entire career in. There aren't a whole lot of streets I'd yet to respond to. However, the address this call came from, I'd never been to. I'd driven past this road many times but never actually revived a call from it. We pull up this old dirt road, and it has a metal chain going across the entrance with a sign that says no trespassing. Because we have to figure out what is going on, me and my partner continue on foot up this long dirt gravel road. The road was maybe 100 yards long. The shitty party that was on each side of the road was a tall chain link fence. Why this was crappy was because now me and my partner were now walking down a fatal funnel. If there happened to be a guy waiting for us at the end of this road, and let's just say with an assault rifle, we would have no place to take cover. And thankfully, that didn't happen. We eventually reached the end of the road, and there are 2 houses on each side. At first, we believe one of these houses is where the call came from. As I'm shining my flashlight at one of the houses, I see a figure move from inside. Instantly, I'm like, oh shit, people actually live back here, as I thought for sure these houses were going to be vacant. Shortly after, a man and a woman walk outside and ask what's going on. We tell them that we received a 911 hang-up from the address 123 Main and asked if they had called. The man tells us his address is 124 Main, and the one across the street is 125 Main, which he claimed was vacant. He proceeds to tell us there is a 123 Main, which is basically in the middle of these tall weeds/forest looking area, just to the north of the house. He says the house is vacant and very run down, and can only be reached on foot, so I ask him how far away it is from his house, and he tells me it's probably a couple of football fields away. Now, while all this walking investigating was going on, dispatch had received 2 more 911 hang-up calls from the same address and same result. Before we made this trek into the middle of the woods, we called for another car, and eventually, another 2-man unit responded. The 4 of us now wandered out into the woods, 2 of us with our assault rifles out, and followed a barely beaten path to where we assumed we would find that house. Fighting spider webs and low-hanging tree branches, we eventually reached our destination. I'm terrible at describing things, but this house was straight out of any horror movie you want to imagine. It was run down. It had a tree that had fallen through the middle and had now become incorporated with the house throughout the years. The house was nearly falling apart and completely overgrown by greenery. Having come this far, we decided to continue on, even though we were pretty sure the house would be vacant. After fighting through some thick brush, we find our entrance. We each have to climb over some fallen brick walls and other wooden shit before we actually make entry. My biggest fear at this point is this stupid rotten house collapsing on itself and being trapped inside with no one being able to find us. We searched the entire house, and like we thought, no one inside. And when I say we searched the entire house, I mean the entire house. Nothing was left unchecked. Feeling satisfied, we all climb our way back out and start heading back towards where the 2 original houses were. As we walk back, dispatch radios us and tells us they had received another 911 hang-up call coming from the same address. This time, dispatch tells us they were able to make a call back. When the person answered, they could hear what sounded like a child playing on the phone. The 4 of us looked at one another and decided we were all done with this call. We had done everything we could up until that point, and we're not about to get called back into a possibly demonic house because a child was on the phone. We clear the call and don't receive any more 911 hang-up calls for the rest of the night. Fast forward maybe 6 months. It's dead-ass winter. 911 hang-up calls from that same address. This time, it's me and 3 guys who weren't there previously. I tell them the story of what had happened, and all 3 are super psyched and want to check it out for themselves. The 4 of us walk back out to this house, now much easier to get to because the cold had killed off a lot of the green. The 3 of them decide to go into the house. I wait outside as I've already had my fun. They don't make it too far once they realize this house is about to collapse on itself, and we all leave again. No call back from a child this time. If I ever go out there again, I'll try and get a picture of the house, just so when I tell other people this story, they can have a better understanding of how fucked it actually is.